betrayed people's trust, faith, made so many mistakes, bad moves, and lost so much. But you're more than just that. Are you? You are! It's not the way you see it. Allow me to explain. It was the 13th of November. The ground was starting to get covered in white snow. Lucy Duck was watching out of her room's windows and admired the snowfall. Lucy was born into a wealthy family. She was followed and raised with a high sense of responsibility. Despite this, Lucy was still a youthful and bit careless girl. She has been living a sheltered life since his father started the new carpentry workshop for the countryside's village where she lived. Lucia thought that her father was completely consumed by the workshop, and she locked up to her room without any explicit reason, other than just to protest his father's time management and no longer paying as much attention to his family as he used to. In the midst of the dark room, Lucia had a wine-red shirt and a pink dress. The colors were melting together in the dress. Lucia herself had a pale and white skin, and she had a long brown hair. Not long until Lucia heard a voice of his father in the house's entrance. Lucia thought that he was just bruising for himself about his achievements, until the voice of someone else, who was a lot younger than her father, started to speak. That was not an adult's voice, she thought. She thought to herself. Not long after, the door of the room opened, and to Lucia's surprise, it was not her father, Roderick, who opened the door. It was someone completely unknown to her. A boy, approximately 16 or 15 years old, stepped into Lucia's room, and his fetus started to unravel. The boy had a gray shirt and black trousers, and his time shined through his eyes, and he had a scratch in his cheek. The boy's arms were muscular, and his hands were as large as bear's paws. The boy said to Lucia in order to break the silence and tension, "Please apologize for my clothing. We came right here after work, so I didn't have any chances to change them." Lucia got confused by this boy, his presence, but then she got an idea who this boy could be, so she asked the following. "Are you the boy who the locals have rumored about my father using child labor?" The boy brushed it off immediately. "I have worked for Mr. Duck almost my entirety of my life. It has been at my free will to bring jobs to our village, at my right and at my will." Lucia started to laugh a little bit because of the boy's serious attitude. "What are you laughing at?" the boy asked, while sounding frustrated and almost a bit frightened. "You, so adult for your age." "What?" "Well, might make sense. You have been working with adults for how long, after all? This is not time to make fun. How else are people supposed to speak to each other? And what do you mean, for my age? Miss Duck You might be older than me, a year or two at least." Why so serious? Why Roderick even took you here? Exactly. To teach you some manners? No. Mr. Dark has already taught me a lot about them. He took me here because of you. Is it true that you have sheltered yourself from the outside world and refuse to even talk to your own father? Now Lucia's attitude saw a change. It turned from light-hearted and calm to more distressed and bit ashamed for her actions.
Yes, I'm not a good daughter for not trying to tell my father how I feel. But he won't pay me any attention. He just keeps bragging about his business and nothing else. But why you just locked up all of a sudden? That if something could get boring, and sound something only a 5-year-old would do. Theodore responded in a very mean tone. Hey, father was the one who started this. Lucia lashed out. Let's start over, and I shall explain why I am here. Your father wished to start a workshop here to create jobs for the poorest farmers who didn't have enough land to feed their family or themselves. I joined the building process because I didn't have anything else to do here. Your father, Roderick, looked after me a while I was still learning everything, and he even paid explicit attention so that I could enjoy warm meals with all the other builders and carpenters. After we started to get along and got to know ourselves a bit better, I was presented with a choice. To my understanding, Roderick feels like you left him because every time he tried to tell you about something, you just stood there quietly without any reaction to anything. And here I came in. Roderick asked for me, am I volunteer to try get you open up if someone outside of the family could get you speak for more? Theodore started to explain. Because I got to hear everything he just thought about the workshop. And I had to hear those same thoughts again and again. Because he thought you were not listening, miss. You didn't even respond to any of your father's words, even if Roderick is to be believed. When Lucia heard that, it all started to make a bit sense for her. She understood that the workshop was a big thing, but she was born into a richer family than the average villager. Everything was so much easier for the Dark family, and they owned almost 1/4 of the farmland. 1/4 of the farmland from the village. So she had no idea how hard some small landowner's life was without a reliable source of income. Her lack of investment for the project caused Roderick, her father, to believe that she had no investment to anything when he was speaking. And when Mr. Dark asked me, someone outside the family, to try and get you open up, I understood it the way that you, miss, didn't even want to talk about anything. And he turned out to be correct, if I am concerned. Lucia started to look down, a bit in shame and regret. You're right, where Dad is right now. Just walk the stairs down. Now I am a bit interested why you didn't feel anything about the workshop project. It is fascinating for me. Theodore tried to ask from Lucia, but she answered to this question with a depressed tone. What if we talk about it with Father? And that had nothing to do with Theodore's previous question. She walked out of her room and moved the stairs down. Lucia entered the dining room of her house, and her father was there preparing the meal after work. Oh, you managed to open up a little when talking to someone completely unknown, asked Roderick Richard Dark, Lucia's father. Roderick's daughter responded, I'm sorry. I thought that you were the one not paying attention, but I didn't even why you didn't say anything. I thought you were not interested at all in anything due to your lifelessness. And I was suddenly get worried. I know it now. I'm the boy you brought here. Theodore walked into the dining room, and Lucia immediately asked from him, I didn't hear your name. Oh, yes. I am Theodore Trevor, from the northern side of the village, Theodore responded. Thank yourself. I get why you took the project the way you did, and I apologize. Lucia said, and started to walk towards her father and hugged him. Now that you finally understand it, all I wanted is to get you open up again. Thank you, Theodore, for your help. Lucia, I got you back, and that is something I am very happy. Lord Roderick responded and hugged his daughter back. And Theodore, would you like to stay here for a dinner? Roderick asked from Theodore. No, I have my own business during the evening. I'd like to stay, but Julius called me back home. If you'd excuse me, bye-bye. Have a nice evening, Mr. and Miss Dark. Theodore said and waited for Roderick's answer before he was going to leave the house.
Goodbye. And thank yourself for making me understand how important things are in this village, Lucia said back to him, still giving in with her slight distaste and bit childishness. Roderick just raised his arm, and so the tensions were gone for that evening. Theodore left the Dark's household, and Darks themselves stayed in the house and started to prepare the dinner again. That is why he wanted me to come here. I didn't expect anyone's child to act like that. Indeed fascinating. What if I'd asked more from Mr. Dark in work? Now get back to this moment, Theodore thought to himself while he was walking back home. Despite the weather being cold, snowy, dark, and slippery, Theodore was more than pleased by it, because of his hobby, or to his calling, lifestyle, could probably start now. The road Theodore walked was very long, dark, and lonely, but he had gotten used to that feeling. It felt almost just like home to him. What didn't feel so good was Theodore's tired body. Since the day had started, it was clear that a rougher time will emerge. Days in the workshop, lifting big and heavy planks and logs around the storage, woodwork that required precision, and the front yard, or the workshop that had to be shoveled open. The day's work still wasn't done, though. But Theodore was not flinched by the slightest. It was just the beginning of another winter. A winter with a big change to his life. But still at this point, just another winter. When Theodore finally arrived to his home, his mother, Elvira Evie Trevor, was waiting for him to help shoveling the front yard open. Elvira was already an old and crippled woman, over 50 years old, and severely weakened by her age. So most of the household's work was made by Theodore. The host of the family, Simon Trevor, had already departed. Simon and Elvira got married together already in exceptionally old age compared to everyone else in the village. So their son had to be the real host very much from birth. Well, Simon's death was a severe step back for the Trevor family, but giving up was not a choice, especially for Theodore. Luckily, the Trevor's front yard was nowhere near as large as the workshops, so it was done way faster than expected. Elvira still lamented about her back and shoulders not being able to stand the pressure. Theodore was astonished by the looks of the docks villa they had, compared to a merely small hut with outdoor storages that was the Travers household. One of the storages was still incomplete, and Theodore swore to himself that one day he will build it ready in order to revenge Simon's death. But this was not that day. After the remaining Travers stepped into the house, Theodore immediately went to the storage room, grabbed the weapon closet's keys, grabbed a shotgun from there, and his hunting clothes, and went back to the house's entrance. I'll be back at least 8 o'clock. Bye, Theodore said to his mother, and stepped back into the darkness. Theodore's mother, Elvira, stayed in the house and started to prepare some food for the evening. She thought that Theodore has gotten way too eager about everything after his father's departure. You are not invincible. Without discipline you will fail at everything, because there is no one who can teach you, she yelled at her son. Even she knew that Theodore didn't hear any of those words she said. She still tried. Back in the forest, Theodore walked towards their own farmlands. The Travers had a dirt road that went through the forest into the biggest farmland. Theodore knew that little game, such as his, didn't move a lot when the ground was covered in new snow. So, he just had to find some footprints from the surface, then follow them until a hare would get on his way, and take it. Despite the lack of daylight, moon provided enough shining light for the hunter in the dark winter night. Theodore found some footsteps on the field, and, as guessed, he started to follow them. Not long, about 200 meters, Theodore had walked through the entire field, and there it was. The situation began. Right when the field was turning into forest, a hare jumped out of Theodore's legs and ran towards the forest. Theodore, of course, acted fast and raised his gun to scope the target, took some forehand, and pulled the trigger. This time, it was a bad shot. The rabbit fell on the ground, but it was severely wounded, not lethally. Theodore caught it up and snapped its neck to end its life. Because the hunter's low energy at the moment, he decided to end the day there and returned home. Back in home, Theodore took the skin off and hanged the corpse. The young hunter walked from the cold yard to the Travers household, where Elvira was expecting her son to appear to eat something before bed. Oh, did you get any game this time? Why you try so much to impress anyone? Always there and always here. Why you don't want me to bring glory to our family? Mother, I want you to have a capable and experienced son. And besides, I am bringing this small village back on the map. I can manage. I really do. And I have people who I can rely on. Yes, I am proud of your devotion, but what if you share the same fate with Simon? You're doing as much as he did, even more. Always trying to impress everyone with everything. Always trying new limits, and then he tried to build the new. Nonsense. It was merely a bad luck. And I told you, I can manage. And I have people around me who know about building and economics, and I can rely on them. Simon was a good father, and I miss him as much as you do, but we have to move on. I agree. You're stuck in your routines, even when we have other important matters as well. Our own matters. What? I'm bringing money and beef to this house. We can't live with just a few funny hectares of farmland and forests we have. Nor do we have any reliable source of income. And thanks to the workshop, if the village has something built with volunteers, we can use it as well. That is what I meant. You're focusing on everyone else's needs, and you forget to take care of your own land. This is about us. Life is about yourself. Together we could have farmed our land even to this day before snow. And I, an old woman, can't do impossibilities anymore. We can have more bread and porridge than you have ever seen. But you decided to hunt around this year and start work for someone else and leave me here to this mere hut. Theodore was getting tired of Elvira's self-centered view on life. He also couldn't stand Elvira's distrust to everyone around him. A human can only see everyone around itself act the way it would, Theodore always thought to himself. But he didn't want to talk about the workshop because similarly, Elvira seemed to have similar interest to it, just like Lucia. At first, they didn't even try to listen. Talk about grains then, but I believe you have to admit that we're not straw men who live only with grains and rye. I have brought kilos of meat to this household every week, and I chop our wood and take care of our forest just like Simon. I take care of ourselves, but also of others. And you gave the results of your work to your boss? Elvira asked in a very mean way. Have you listened at all what I have been trying to say? Theodore responded back. He wanted to argue even more, but after the day was over, he was just waiting bedtime. Even Elvira's meal was completely tasteless when he was just tired enough. Elvira still kept arguing back, but Theodore really didn't want to even answer them. Despite the not so happy atmosphere in the table, Theodore still thanked his mother, went to the shower, brushed his teeth, and wished good night for Elvira, and went to sleep. The day was over, and a new was emerging. Theodore had some questions left from his visit to the dogs, but they could wait for now. And even the snowfall had stopped, so tomorrow could start with lesser burden. And Theodore had more time to hunt. And something Theodore didn't even consider. The next day was the 1st of December, and the wait for Christmas could begin. To be continued. It was at 5 a.m. when the Travers household started to wake up. Theodore had to wake up for work, and Elvira woke up because Theodore and Simon were both very early birds, and they didn't really know how or why to keep quiet. Also, Theodore was not the best one in the kitchen yet, so Evie took that role for herself, even when she was still half asleep. And so began the 1st of December. After Theodore had eaten Elvira's porridge and taken some loaves of bread with some meat on them, he left the house for work. The snowy weather had ended, and now when Theodore opened his house's door, he was greeted with a chilling wind in the morning's darkness. The sun was still rising, and in the distance its shines almost could have been spotted against the clouds in the sky. Another day for work, and another morning winter during the darker months were a lot more likable for the young traveler. He thought that the day needed certain rules. Mornings and evenings were darker. The day was bright. Mornings and evenings were darker, and the day was bright.
It was one of the main reasons why Theodore considered himself as a winter person. After Theodore got finally back to the workshop, he was greeted with his elderly friend, Gustav Creeklake, a calm gentleman who was the village's school's teacher, which unfortunately ended its activity due to emigration from the countryside to cities. "Welcome back, my young friend," he shouted to Theodore from the entrance. "Good morning to you as well," Theodore shouted back. "Mr. Dark is still on his way, but I also have the keys to this door, so this time I shall open the door for you. But since we are here, what would you like to plan for today's lesson?" Gustav asked from his student. "What if you tell me more about history today? I've already played enough with numbers the last few weeks," Theodore replied. Gustav answered with his usual friendly and fatherly tone. "But of course, you've been doing very well with problem solving in the storage. Let's get in." After having said that, Gustav opened the workshop's door and entered his office. Theodore took a piece of paper on Gustav's desk and read it. "This is not usual for Roderick to be late. The clock is already 5:30. He usually is always right on time. Were you my boy with him the last evening? It is truly a rarity of him being late," Gustav said out loud while preparing his typewriter. Theodore replied back, "Yes, I believe everything should be completely in order. Well, he arrives when he arrives." Gustav nodded in agreement and started to write a final report of November. Theodore walked up to the workshop side with his task list. The workshop was still completely empty, so Theodore had practically full freedom over the place. But during the time of Christmas, the hours started to get very stressful and packed with projects. This was something that the older and more experienced workers had already gotten used to and have learned how to prepare their days before the busy times. Theodore wasn't yet the most skilled at time management or making big plans for month-long periods, and he needed someone's help to make his plans realistic and precise as possible. Still, Theodore followed his task list's orders and walked up to the storage, grabbed one long 2-4 and started to make some marks on it with a pencil. Just when Theodore had drawn the first line, Roderick appeared on the entrance. "Only a few minutes late. Nothing to be worried of. How you two been doing?" "Nothing too important yet." "All right. No one else is here at this time of the day, like usual. If you need help, just ask, since now I also have time to help." And so the back and forth ended, and Roderick went to change his clothes that were more suitable for carpentry. Gustav was the workshop's office manager and an accountant. Also, he liked to keep his own style with his work, so he was the only one with a suit or something else more celebrative clothing out of all the workers in the workshop. Even Roderick might have had some days of his own suit, but they were exceptional. Hurries and emissions were part of the daily routine, especially during the mornings, because most of the workers arrived at 7:13 a.m., while Gustav and Roderick came at the workshop at 5:30 a.m. Theodore followed the latter, because he really didn't have anything else to do during the mornings, other than just to wait the hour when the work would start. Also, he admired Gustav and Roderick's way of time management, so that was also a factor. Because of the hurries of Christmas, many different projects had to be managed at once in order to get them all ready in time. Theodore's number one project of today were skis for traveling and hiking. They had to be long, thin, and well designed, but still tough and unbreakable. Theodore already had the planks ready for the skis, and then he had to turn and plane down on the edges to make the design more elegant. After that was ready, it was the turning's turn, and the clock was already closing at 8 a.m., and the first set of carpenters have already arrived. A phenomenon that had cursed the village where the workshop was held was that its middle age started to rise fast after the urbanization had reached the more remote areas as well. Also, because of the new taxation system of the country, it was not profitable to have a small farm and trying to make a living out of it, even a fraction of it. Because of all this, almost 3/4 of the village's youth were moving to cities and towns that were started to grow around the village. And so the countryside's only people would be men and women who were already over 30 years old and had a reasonably sized farm so they can feed themselves and also sell some of their products. But you couldn't spot this rise in middle age any better than in the dog's workshop, because most of the workers were either former pensioners from some other jobs or they were already significantly weakened by their age, that the farmland's work was too much for them, so they had to find some other way to still support their family. For one other 30-year-old was 7 pensioner aged, approximately 55/70 years old men. Theodore was the youngest, 15 years old, and the second youngest worker was 22, then 24, and then 27, and then there was only 2 brothers, whose age was between 13 and 40, and the rest were already starting to become nearly 60 years old. Despite the aging workers, the atmosphere was high up and very positive. The workshop was built with voluntary power and it was sustained with one as well. So all the carpenters knew each other and had an emotional connection to their jobs. Also, many of them were happy to see familiar faces and people they already had formed a good connection to. After Theodore had the skis planks turned and planed, they were awaiting their next step, twisting their heads. After the process was started, the planks' heads were forced to bend upwards. Suddenly, the lunch bell started to ring, and the lunch break could begin. While the 29 carpenters moved on to the dining hall, Gustav walked on the hall's doors with a piece of paper and stated the following. Gentlemen, I'll explain more during the lunch, but I say now that we have no reason to hurry this time, and probably from now on. Gustav tried to sound calm, but his voice was exceptionally low for him, and he certainly was not at his happiest moments. Despite his very unclear statement, everyone nodded back to him and entered the dining hall. In the dining hall was very questionable tension because of that statement given by Gustav. Despite it, a lot of the things were still normal. Roderick walked up towards Theodore during the lunch break and sat next to him as usual. But this time, Roderick had a serious look on his face, and he wanted to talk about something more serious subject this time. I'd like to talk a little bit about your visit yesterday. and a bit more personal matters. But wait until Gustav gets to say what he has to tell us. Roderick whispered to Theodore's ear, while Gustav was preparing for an unfortunate reveal from this year's reports for the workers and for the workshop in general. Gustav started to speak, but his voice cracked from time to time, and he looked very pale for having to tell his friends about the situation. Since your great efforts have paid off for our company, we are still working under the same roof as always. And we've been able to top each year with more challenges and obstacles. I'm afraid the next obstacle is something we cannot best with just this fine group. As you are aware of our situation, the population of our beautiful village has gotten smaller year by year, and so has the amount of customers. Also, the farmlands have started to move on to the biggest landowners, which decreases the potential amount of new customers and drives annually tens of families away from here. There is no longer only one solution. And for it we need all of your help we can just get. We will expand our service to the markets outside of this village. Specifically, the two nearest towns, Upward and Clawlake. This means that more work is required from you, but also it means more possible revenue for us and new possible workers to sustain our fine workshop. This Christmas will be way calmer than ones we've had in previous years, but for the sake of our product getting more universal respect and recognition, we need you to put your finest art of hands for them. So I will ask from you, my friends, are you with us? After Gustav had finished that sentence, the dining hall was conquered by complete silence. It was all a pure shock for the unfortunate news, which everyone knew were coming, but they were just not ready for such a big change in action. More specifically, taking the risk to try and gaining control over the markets of the outside world, which had no knowledge of the village even existing. It was until an unexpected voice started to rise and breaking the silence. The oldest worker of them all, Eric Pinehill, rised up and decided to give his opinion on the choice given to them. What else we've been doing other than taking risks? Building up a workshop with voluntary force in the middle of nowhere? Then we've been carpenters for how long? Sure, we have capable hands for more spreaders. Yes. And if it requires better quality in our work, why wouldn't we at least see how it will end up? Added his friend Paul Sandland. What they said, stated the rest of the group, and Gustav replied back. Good. I knew we could count on your capable hands and minds. Now, when the dining hall was filled by a pleased mood of doing. For a long time, the workshop had a project and plan where everyone would play their role. And once again, it was something that was unclear. It fascinated all the men, because for now, in a longer time than expected, They would have to take actual risks and make choices. Everyone else was chatting and throwing their own ideas around the table. Roderick leaned towards Theodore again and started to whisper to his ear. I want to thank you for making my daughter speak again. We almost had been too good morning together that I didn't even make here in my usual time. But to a more serious matters, come to my office after this lunch. It is about your future this time, what I have to tell you. Theodore nodded and shifted his focus back on the lunch. This time it was salmon soup. Salty and mixed with potatoes, sweets and carrots. The mix was great and expertly made thanks to the hired cooks. The old man ate their soup fast and rushed back to work, like it was their last possible day. Roderick and Gustav also went to their own offices, and Theodore left the dining hall last. He first tried the skis' heads, if they were already bended enough. Not this time, so they were still left on the place, and Theodore headed towards Roderick's office, where Mr. Dark was already expecting his apprentice, with a piece of paper that looked like a deal that had to be signed. What might this mean? I think in the middle of already big shakes, this may not be the best time to tell you this. But you have already helped us so much that I can't hold myself anymore. Theodore, I wish you to be the next owner of this workshop. You are the finest man I can find just from here. I will not be here forever, and it's not like I don't trust anyone else. You are the one I can trust the most. I'll ask from you. This is my testament which says that this workshop and its machinery will belong to you after my death. Also, I have promised you 25,000 marks for the bottom cash while this building is transported to you. Will you, Theodore Gabriel Trevor, sign it? This came to me a bit too quick. Why you won't find anyone more experience with running a business and handling risks? I need to think about this more. Theodore started to stutter while still trying to keep his cool. There isn't any reason to hurry with this deal. I'm not leaving this world tomorrow. To answer your question, I can find a wealthy and ambitious businessman who has never probably had a hammer in his own hand, and just hope it would be it. I'm not like that. I want to have an assurance that the next owner has an emotional connection to this place. Roderick explained while pointing the photographs on his office's wall, which show the most important days for the workshop's development. When its foundings were started to get digged, the building phase started and ended, and the workshop could bring in jobs. What is in common with all these pictures? You are there in all of them. I want a capable head for this company, and I am sure you can become one. After all, you're still just 15. Your prime years are about to begin. You have also proved yourself that you're a fast learner. Roderick tried to reason with his choice of Theodore being his follower. Guess you, Mr. Dark, are right. If you just help me while I am starting my career in your place, I'll happily accept your testament. Theodore gathered his thoughts and said back, Good.
Just wait until we have some sort of witnesses. You may leave now.
Roderick said back while looking and sounding very excited about the turn of events. Theodore headed back to the workshop side of building. Since the skis were still bent enough, Theodore thought to take a look at his task list again in order to find any new projects for him to start, while still waiting. The list had its next step already about surface treatment. Find good enough tar from the storage. All right, Jabba thought, despite him having a little odd feeling about the new instructions. Don't try to get any new messes. Theodore tried to suppress those thoughts and acted like he was instructed. Outside of the workshop walked a woman wearing in her winter clothes a scarf made out of furs from Fox's tail and a silk jacket. She didn't even knock at the door. She was just waiting for something, or specifically, someone. The day was starting to turn into an evening, and our work would end started to get closer minute by minute. Because the significantly lowered amount of customers during the busiest time of the year, less burden would be carried, but that meant for the carpenters a great playground of new ideas and more detail-oriented designs. Suddenly, Roderick decided to give a new specialized order for his men, stating the following. Friends, I want your attention here, because now I have made up a new idea for the weekend. In Sunday, we will hold a meeting at 9 a.m. discussing about our new designs and ideas, in order to organize our attempts with a proper plan and unified picture. Now, keep going for a bit longer, because the clock is ticking. If you feel so, gather up your machinery and materials, and start a cleanup time. The workshop's power nodded back to their leader and decided to slow down their pace for now, so nothing unchangeable would be made before the finalized blueprint. So began the cleanup time. While Theodore was looking for the brush, Roderick interrupted him with a question. What do you think? Do you have time for Sunday's meeting? If not, I'll tell the results you on Monday. I believe I have. All right. Were you looking for the brush? It seems it's already taken. Everyone and everything looked like it was all ready and cleaned. There were still some discussions about the meeting, but it was all otherwise clear what will happen and when. The carpenters started to move away from their job. They said goodbye and left home when the bell rang. The woman who was waiting outside of the workshop turned out to be no other than Lucia Duck herself. She was waiting her father, something that was almost completely out of her kind for all the last years. All the old seniors recognized her and were ready to tell Roderick about Lucia's presence. Roderick heard those shouts and rushed by himself to the scene. What made you come here? Asked Roderick with a tone that was certainly not of his type. He sounded at the same time confused, but also a bit relieved and happy. Didn't have anything else to do, so I came here to see you, all of you. But I don't know. How should I take this? Take it easy. We had finally more relieved and social time. I began to miss it already in school. This unexpected visit really got under Roderick's skin. And while he didn't know anything how to respond to such, the old seniors decided to leave the place. They thought that the family's privacy should be kept as such, and Roderick was easily humiliated when he started to stutter in a big group. Theodore was still gathering his warmer clothes for the outside, and he was not at the present at the moment until Lucia arrived. However, when Theodore finally arrived to the entrance, Lucia immediately catched it on. Hey, Theodore, weren't you? I also want to talk a bit to you, Lucia told him and whispered something to her father's ear. I'd like to talk a bit in person with him. Is it okay? Roderick nodded to her daughter, and she turned towards Theodore and walked to him. Hey again. I want to talk a bit to you, since there isn't a lot of our age people anymore. What do you think we could meet during the weekend? Theodore almost blushed because of those words. He didn't want to even believe what he heard. Why? Because Theodore has been living under people he was not the most fond of. Elvira was an incredibly jealous and bitter to almost everyone around her. So she was not the ideal mother for someone very socially awkward and an inexperienced child. Simon, while he was still alive, was strict, very thin-skinned, and almost abusive like an impatient teacher. While Theodore tried to impress himself that Simon was just nervous, and so that the way he was. It's out of care, he shrugged and yelled at his son. Theodore kept repeating and repeating. Not only because of the lack of positive atmosphere around home, but also Theodore's lack of knowledge how especially his age group would talk and behave in conversation was alienating for him. And because of his background, he wasn't the most optimistic about being socially attached to someone. The only people Theodore actually felt like he had a mutual respect and trust, a proper connection, were Gustav Creeklake and Roderick Richard Dark. Even you can say all of the Dark's workshop workers to an extent. Still, Theodore looked at Lucia into her eyes and started to recognize a gesture that looked like the question was genuine. Theodore also couldn't help but see Lucia's similar facial features from Roderick, and those comforted him, and so Theodore got his mouth open and replied, "All right. Where and when would you like to have a meeting? I'm all free for this weekend." Theodore got from his mouth. He just couldn't help but smile. Finally, someone still very much unknown person who he had an easy time having a conversation. Just anything after 3 a.m. is fine for my timetables. Or if it's about weekends, any time is just fine. What if we'd see us tomorrow at our villa? Or where your whereabouts? What if? What if I'll come to see you at tomorrow about 10, 11 a.m.? Yes, as long as it's okay to you, Lucia answered to Theodore's suggestion and gave a sweet smile for him. She walked towards her father and they chatted about something Theodore couldn't hear. But he thought that it didn't belong to him if he couldn't hear that, so he also started to prepare his return to home. Approximately 2 steps were taken, and Lucia appeared behind the Trevor and tried to make him stop for a second. What if we'd walk together? Were our homes still on the same path? Yes, they are. Theodore gave an assurance to Lucia's thought. Lucia was the more eager one in conversations, and she was always the one who chose the subject and the first almost every time to put her word on it. Not like Theodore wasn't speaking at all. He was just not the one who was as active as Lucia. Father and Mr. Creeklake still stayed in the workshop because they had matters to still be discussed. Do you know what those matters could be, Theodore? The carpet was taken completely under the Trevor's legs when Lucia used his first name just like that. But that was like Lucia liked him. Illogical, Theodore tried to brush those thoughts away. If she'd shown this form of kindness, she's just like her father. Nothing more. Trevor was trying to get his mind in order to answer the question from Miss Dark anyways. They are planning on preparing a meeting for Sunday about new designs and new looks for our products, if I am concerned. This may get a little bit too personal, so no pressure. But why you started work as a small child in my father's service? I didn't have anything else to do. All we could have done in home was already done, but it wasn't enough to keep ourselves alive. Admirable. Like you said, Father took good and explicit care for you, right? At least he always spoke very highly of you. Since you've seen a lot about our family, why wouldn't you tell me about yours? After those words were said, Theodore was about to blush again, because he was for a rare time the sort of spotlight of attention, something that was almost unthinkable for the boy. He gathered his head and started to speak as much as he wanted. It's complicated. My father has been gone for about 5 years because of an accident that occurred. And because of my mother's worsening health, I have been the head of our household for a while. We have nothing special, just farm owners in this village with some woodlands as well. What else I'd say? Theodore stopped his monologue when he saw that Lucia started to look down and she started sobbing. Is everything all right? Yes, I just thought of your... Theodore realized that he might have mentioned something he shouldn't have. So he got the conversation in short. No need to force an answer if it's too much. Yes, you are right. Think about something else. Theodore's mind started to get puzzled by Lucia's sudden interest in everything. But before he could have think about that deeper, Lucia stopped in her track, like she was waiting for something. Are we seeing us here tomorrow? I have no one else I can open up aside from my family here, especially when it's this close home. If you know how far my friends are, you know what I'm talking about. Do they live in a completely different region? Sounds like it. Yes. Yes, if you wish to put it like that. Now, if I'd wait for you during the morning tomorrow, I can show you a lot of places I know from our lands. Theodore thought it a while until he realized that from this turn on you walk in the Dark's villa. So he nodded quickly to Lucia and said goodbye for her and kept walking. Lucia did the same. Time flies when I had someone speak and discuss about something, Trevor thought when he was closing his own home. The last subject of theirs really seemed to get under skin, given to Lucia's reactions. What might have been so dramatic about family drama that got Lucia almost to cry? Maybe we'll get those answers tomorrow. But in which Theodore had an answer was that the day's surprise would be over, and now he can move on to the forest to hunt even more game. When he arrived at this house, the same pattern repeated itself, and Theodore went to his favorite deer place, which was in the recently renewed piece of forest. It was an open enough place, but still providing enough protection from the cold wind. This place was about 1 kilometer away from the Trevor's house, so having to pick up a full-grown deer's corpse and bringing it to home could cause problems. But challenges were just challenges to be overcome, right? Theodore even thought that he can bring some game with him to tomorrow's visit. It was a set and waiting to be done. Theodore went on his spot, only for at least an hour, because of the darkness. It was already thick and took away a lot of the visibility. At least one deer and call it a day. This time Theodore had his father's old rifle, made up by the most critically acclaimed company of gun manufacturing, Samo. The rifle's model was the classic 84-308 Win, and the lock was made out of Teflon-treated metal. Theodore was starting to get already tired, and because of that, started to shiver a bit despite his thick clothes. Come on now. Just one deer on the most used paths, Theodore repeated to himself it all. His waiting paid off, because through the wind he could hear steps from the right side. Just stand still until the target presents itself. The steps became louder and louder until the deer appeared at sight. A male deer, with its horns holding 6 spikes. Not the most impressive, but just enough. Trevor raised his gun, turned off the safer, scoped, and before his target was able to even spot the danger, it was a shot. After that, the deer ran at full speed away from the situation. Not long, about 15 meters away from the spot Theodore shot the deer, it was dead. Tracking a wounded animal was child's play when the ground was covered with snow. So, Theodore found his prey pretty early on. Theodore took the deer's organs out from it and brought it back home. The young hunter was met with a bit of a surprise when he realized that their storage for hanging corpses was full. No can do, so Theodore grabbed the hare he shot yesterday and replaced it with a deer. Before Theodore left the storage, he took a part from the deer's tenderloins and packed it. After that was done, Theodore took the hare into the house and started to cut it in the kitchen. Elvira was staring at her son for a few seconds like she was angry about something, while she was preparing the table for a meal. She opened her mouth for a change and said, I'm going to the market store tomorrow. I'll bring us what I can just get. Theodore realized what her mother was talking about. He finished the hare's cutting, ate his meal that Elvira prepared, put off his wallet and slammed a few pennies on the dining table. He left to the sanitary facility, brushed his teeth, and wished good night for his mother. Elvira stared at those pennies, and even put out a little smile for a while. After a few minutes, she finally responded to her son, and also went to sleep. So ended the 1st of December. A lot happened during the day, and
a lot was planned, so they are waiting their fulfillment. To be continued. I should leave this workshop to someone who knows his role before it. You're just a soulless businessman. There was open feelings. Look at you, poor boy. I think we can have some fun for a moment now. What are you talking about? Think about you. No, I'll leave you alone tomorrow. Hasn't the entire project been a risk? What if we just give up and so we don't have to take no longer any risks? They're not scared. What he said. I wish to leave this workshop suffering. You. It wasn't a day. Theodore just woke up while having a confused mind due to the dream he just happened to saw. Now try to remember what really happened. Now I got it. Never thought that dreams can actually affect you. The young Trevor thought, and he took a look at his alarm clock that he almost never needed. But he still had it just in case. The clock was 4 a.m. A perfect time to wake up. Theodore started to think until he remembered. The day was Saturday. Because Theodore was not yet 80 years old yet, Roderick made a deal with him that he didn't have to work during the weekends unless Theodore wanted so. Another thing that Trevor remembered was today's visit to the docks, and that his mother talked something about going to the store of Claw Lake. A perfect combination, Theodore thought for a moment. Nothing else to do, so the younger Trevor raised from his bed and wore some more fancy clothes than usual. He found his pressed black trousers that he liked a lot to keep when he wasn't at work. Then he chose his collared shirt with golden roses here and there. Both these clothes were very old, but they've been under good care, because for the few times Theodore was willing to give credits to Elvira with his whole heart, were his skills at cleaning and sustaining clothes. Pleased with his choices, Theodore moved on to the kitchen and started to make some breakfast for himself, as well as he could. Theodore took some slices from the hair he cut yesterday and started to heat it with the cooker. The man's thought process was simple. Put some butter in the pan and take the meat to the butter. Then put the cooker on. Elvira started to make noise from her bedroom and rised up. Theodore thought that this time he doesn't need help, but Elvis still tried to push him aside until Theodore expressed his opinion on the matter. Elvira didn't look quite happy over the protest, but then she went back to sleep, because she wasn't the house's morning person. 3 minutes in, and the breakfast has already been prepared. It was eaten almost as fast as it was done. Now, when Theodore had no work to do, no time to go for his usual hunt into outside nature, he decided to head towards the storage where the corpses were hanged. The bedshed was made completely out of concrete and plaster onto the inside, boring grey from top to bottom, but still it felt like a safe haven for the young Trevor. Theodore felt like it because hunting, with all of its side missions and post work, reminded him of success. Success that he was the one who learned everything by himself. And whenever
he was helped. He didn't have to get to remember all his swellings and trauma he went through. But what else Simon could have done? Theodore reasoned with himself, like he was silently trying to accept it all like he deserved it. Theodore started to cut the corpse of a deer he shot last week. The ideal time for hanging corpses was 1 to 3 days, but time simply wasn't always on his side, and because of it, the hanging time stretched a lot more than expected. The corpse was cut and then into different parts and separated. The hunter took the worst parts of the corpse and brought them to the house in a big box made of plastic. Along the way, he took a look at the storage that took Simon's life. One day when I'm done with everything else. While Theodore was telling that to himself, a snowfall began. This time the snowflakes were smaller and more powder-like compared to the first snow that was always a lot wetter and compact. That brought a thought for the Trevor to try and shovel the snow out of their building's roofs, just in case, so the snow won't press them to crumble. Theodore was right at his home store until Elvira opened it right before him. Well, she had 2 clapper bags in her hand. "Oh, thank you," Theodore said to her mother. "You are welcome and bye-bye." Elvira replied back fast and started to walk towards the city of Claw Lake. So early on. Theodore thought and walked back to his home's warmth. It was until he looked at the clock, which showed to be already 6:50. A bit of a surprise. Time flies when it's about handworking. Put those pieces of meat in the fridge and wait until the time comes to visit, Theodore then decided to do. The boy's patience was a test here. When he had time to wait for something while all he could do is wait and sit down. Nothing to do, nothing to start for now. It was truly confronting. Until the clock started to move towards 9:30 a.m., Theodore decided to make his move and left the house. He took the sack where he took the part from the deer's tenderloins and went to the house's entrance. For this time, Theodore chose for his footwear a pair of recently blanked leather shoes. Despite the shoes being old, they were used a lot and they were taken a good care. Because of those factors, they were just like brand new shoes. Theodore started to walk on the same road like he always did, but this time it was for a cause he wasn't certain at all. Talking and visiting a girl's house. What next? Theodore puzzled himself. But then he reassured himself with thoughts he made up yesterday. Complete denial of anything that could have sounded too positive. The boy was just too used to being disappointed with his skills and luck in many ways. When he finally was closing in the road cross that led to the duck's villa, Theodore stopped and decided to wait a little if Lucia would appear at the cross a bit later than him. Through the time, the snowfall started to get stronger and stronger with the rising wind. Theodore felt it on his face and his view. Eyes had to be closed for a while so they won't get full in snow. And cheeks started to get more and more delicate to touch because of the cold air and wind. After a few minutes, someone appeared on the road on the duck's village side, and Theodore immediately recognized her when the figure seemingly recognized Theodore from the other side of the road. She started to walk a bit faster, even run in the end. Theodore raised his right arm and started closer the figure coming towards him, and so she did. "Good morning, Lucia," Theodore said when the two could finally hear each other. Good morning," Lucia said back while wiping snowflakes out of her hair. Rest of the road, just come along with me," Lucia continued while pointing at her home. "Yes, of course," Theodore said back and started to walk through the snowy road, and Lucia came next to him and walked along. "Why didn't at first glance just walk up to your home? After all, I invited you," Lucia said to the boy next to her, in a bit jokey kind of tone. Theodore replied back, "Didn't we agree that we should meet at the crossing roads? I thought that our day would begin there." While Theodore tried to reason with his choice, he felt like something was not okay in him. Yes, we did. But still, my doors are open to you. No need to be so simple and formulaic. Just saying." Lucia replied even back. She didn't mean anything bad, nor was that statement meant to be specifically anything mocking. Despite this, Theodore still started snapping into his dream he saw in the morning. His eyes started to wide up, and Theodore's mouth started to look like he was disgusted about something. "Hey, Theodore, is everything all right? I didn't mean anything bad. You just stood up to the way of your thinking," Lucia said to Theodore regretfully, and even slightly frightened. No, it just reminded me of something. Everything's all right." Theodore tried to regain his thoughts and head back together. Good. Let's enter our house then." As Lucia and Theodore chatted a bit while Lucia opened the dog's villa's door, they were greeted with a warm air from the house. Lucia swept still some snow from her hair, and Theodore took his hat off and hit it a few times to the villa's door, so the snow could fall off. Lucia took her scarf and jacket off, put them on the hanger. Theodore dropped his sack and did the same. Lucia catched on the sack's holdings and asked, "What you brought along with you? Never did I ask anything." "You didn't, but still I did, because I believe it's respectful." Lucia gave her smile to Theodore and said back to him, "You're right. But what do you have there?" "Allow me to show you," Theodore replied, and went to the house's kitchen, where he opened the sack, which would hold the deer's tenderloins. Lucia was astonished by this reveal, and she was so surprised that she couldn't even get any words from her mouth for a while. Theodore was the first time the one to speak for change. "I got this one yesterday, and I thought I'd thank you for the invitation, bringing you the most wanted piece of meat from the game's corpse. Is it really true that you have taken this one by yourself? Really appreciate it after all. It's as if you're a professional butcher. Just looks like professional handwork." "I wouldn't go that far. It's just something I've been doing my entire life. And sure has paid off." The two talked to one another. Lucia started to get closer and closer at the look the tenderloins piece Theodore brought to them. She started to pack it again when Theodore got his hands off from it for a while. But then Lucia did what she really intended to do. She hugged Theodore and whispered to him, "No one else has ever done something like this. Like this to us during their visit. This is really remarkable, at least to me." Theodore couldn't believe what he just heard. Not like he never got any compliments, but in him getting such care and kindness. None of it has ever been like this. He was even about to shed a tear when Lucia pulled back a bit. She didn't completely let go, but took some distance, while slapping her hands on Theodore's wide and big shoulders. She looked into the boy she hugged, and saw a noticeable change in his behaving. That, that was truly nice of you. No one else had ever given me anything like that, Theodore said whilst a tear leaked from his eye, and his hands and his voice started to vividly shake. Lucia's look into Theodore's eyes went from happy and thankful to regretful and disappointed. She didn't quite understand why that hug was so big for Theodore. It was all right. Why such a sad look? Theodore managed to gather himself and closed his big hands at Lucia's arms without really knowing what he was doing. Lucia then tried to get her smile again and asked, "Like this?" and gave Theodore another hug, this time almost even tighter one. She asked again, "Why is this one hug so big for you? I've never gotten something like this, especially from a girl. I just thanked you with my heart on it, but now I feel like something else is getting to me." Theodore interrupted her with a question, similar wording to Lucia's question, if you'd like to put it like that. Theodore was still a bit hesitant what he should do here. Giving a hug back would sound like a good choice, but then he thought that it was all from gratefulness. So a hug back sounded for him like it was inappropriate decision. But when he remembered Lucia's second saying out of her questions, Theodore thought and took a risk and gave some sort of a hug back. After that was done, Lucia said out loud back to him, "Oh, not so hard after all. Why you repulsed it? I didn't. I really don't know. I really don't." After those words were said, Lucia got her sorrowful gesture again on her face. Theodore was so closed off to things like this. Well, even the man himself didn't know why. "Is everything okay?" Lucia tried to test Trevor a bit. She let go of her arm slowly to her back. It was all done slowly and carefully. When Theodore recognized these moves, he immediately got his arms back to himself, like he thought he shouldn't have done anything. Then Lucia pulled her arms back normally and took a step away from Theodore while instinctively having her face that told she was almost sad about something. "Why a face like that? Is everything all right?" Theodore said while his voice was still shaking and tried to get something different to think for himself. So he started to pack the tenderloins. Lucia gave a response to that question. After a few seconds, she got her face to normal again. "It all just sounds distant to me, that no one really seems to give you any credit." "I don't know anything else about myself getting thanks. At least before this day. I can guess why that's the way it is," Theodore said back. Lucia was puzzled about Theodore's seemingly apathetic view on his lack of social and mental support. Shall we get into more positive and do something together to cheer the atmosphere? I planned a lot for us outside the doors, but now the snowfall doesn't really show any mercy. So, what if we do something here, right here? Lucia suggested while she took one of the closest, some sort of green box on the cardboard. All right. What do you have here? Or what can be done? Theodore asked with a smile on his face. It's not necessarily a lot about doing, just being together and enjoying our company. Theodore was tested before at his limits of not showing embarrassment, shyness, and uncomfortableness. But after these days' events, he couldn't help it. And red spread around his face in a blink of an eye. Also, Theodore's expression turned from his normal, more or less calm to openly uncomfortable. He was pulled into a new world of sorts, which had nothing to do with duties or tasks. Something that was very uncertain and new. How he could be sure to make the right move or say the right thing when it was about making it easy and having fun. To make the matters even more uncertain, with a woman who wasn't yet the most familiar to the traveler. What is so awkward about all? It's just part of life, and especially in our age, to have fun, right? Lucia tried to reassure Theodore about the day. Excuse me. This all is just unknown for me. Trying new ground, of course. I'd like to try it out. The things you said are not something I'd usually hear. Theodore responded back while he was trying to get his insecurities out of his head. It really got difficult when he really didn't know what might await. I'll warm us some water and we make some tea out of it. Have you ever before drank tea? No, they are completely new for me. Okay, then take a look at this. Lucia started to make tea for the couple and Theodore was following it with seeming interest. After the water was warmed, Lucia filled two of the family's inherited luxury cups and put the tea sacks there. Waiting it to get ready, Theodore, who had never seen or tasted tea in his life, was fascinated how the process took place. It's now ready. Take the sack out from the water and try it out. Theodore sipped the hot tea a bit and felt something he has experienced only a few times in his life. Trying out something completely exotic. Where does this taste come from? I have drank hot drinks for once a year, but this is such a twist. Even from all these beautiful cups. How can I thank you enough of this? Says the man who brought actual self-made meat to us. Even so, Theodore kept sipping the tea while watched the outside of the house. A perfect contrast with everything. Outside was chilling, windy and cold. On the inside it was warm, steady and comfortable. Theodore had drank already about half of his tea, and the rest of it he swallowed with one go. Lucia was about to do her last sip before the tea was about to end with her as well. Lucia tried to offer something new once again. What if we'd talk about agriculture? We might have something to add there from a child. Oh, what else could I come up with? Our work over our farms are mostly done by father and his crofters. I do the nearest hectares. All of our men have their own horses, and I may borrow my dad's horse. He has even talked about buying a new tractor to his house. Our situation is not like that. We are not crofters, but really only a bit above that all. Sometimes you can see it as positive. After all, my work hours under the workshop service and the amount of work my mom can perform alone. Although I enjoy it more when I get to be outside and work almost completely on my own. I wouldn't be, for example, here if it wasn't for my place under Mr. Dark's service.
What else? Well, for our horses, we had two of their necessary roles, but then they got too old, so we sold them to a horse breeder. We were promised to get one foal after the winter is over. Oh, did you say that you were starting to become the only capable worker for your household? Yes, through time. But I will find a solution to it, just like I have before. Theodore said, referring to the time after Simon died. Lucia couldn't help it but feel pity for her quest. He constantly had to be so tough and so much alone. Something that was for a Lucia a completely unheard. And you are about to do it all alone? Lucia still tried to reason with all that she has heard, not knowing that this only threw Theodore even further limits. If I have no other choice, what else there is to be done? Do I even know what or how it'll end up if I don't even try? Theodore answered, sounding just like the men from yesterday's dining now. Are you really so sure about it all? Alone? How else? Theodore replied back with even more determination. Lucia felt only more concerns over her new friend. Are you entirely sure? The challenges of being two places at once? I'm not so familiar with you yet, but all alone. Theodore's expression saw a change once again. Once he was about to gain his mask of self-control and calmness back, it got cracked once again, as this time sadness started to push through. He tried everything, closed his eyes, and turned his face downwards. All I can do, I believe, that then it's all of life, just like it always has been. No work, no time. Theodore tried to say without having his voice grab out of sobbing. Lucia wasn't having it. She was astonished of Theodore's asceticism, partially because she wasn't used to being constantly under sheer pressure over basic needs. But Theodore was pulling it all to extremes. Lucia realized that no amount of talk would change her quest, especially in one evening. So she came up with something different. Lucia waited some time before presenting the idea, so it wouldn't be too obvious. What can you come up with when I really haven't prepared the day for us being constantly indoors? What if we do outside, despite the bad weather? Okay, doing a little trip into your lambs? Probably. Not too far though, because we could also shovel our yard open. I really could use help. All right, I am interested to see some of your lambs, but I'll happily help your family. Hasn't he already done that? How much exactly? Lucia thought in her head, but they moved on. The snowfall started to change as the day went on. It started to let loose, and the wind was already way milder than in the morning. So the circumstances were also a lot more giving. Theodore and Lucia stepped outside of the Dark's villa, and they grabbed the shovels with them to open the way to the field Lucia wanted to show for Theodore. This is the largest one on the east, the furthest from the west, or the closest one right there. Lucia was interrupted by Theodore's guesses. The two shoveled their way through the yard and went on a small road leading up to the field that was under Lucia's.
Theodore, once he had figured out the route by himself, was actually the first one there. Why you? And what you wanted me to see here? Just the general look. Lucia pointed out in the sky, then moving her finger around. The sky was colored by the sun, which pushed through the cloud formations, adding a pink and purple pigment to the mix. Then Lucia was pointing to the forests and rivers, which created the land changes of height and different sources of income. Theodore has always seen these kinds of landscapes before, him living here after all. But just by seeing and presented by someone else added its own charm in everything. After the landscape was presented, Lucia wished to tell her role in the family's fields specifically. I was still a little girl when this piece of land was given under my responsibility. Ever since I was 5, I have turned and collected the wheat that grows here. At first, I constantly needed help, but after a while it all started to get in order. And some other land pieces were also given under my responsibility. That is what I wanted to tell and show to you. Was it difficult to, also the downhill specifically, when you were still learning, or how hard is it now? No longer too much of a problem. Of course, the first time it was all about to get a little dangerous. Father had to intervene many times, and I even once almost fell down my place there. But it's all done for this year. Theodore was granted a bit surprised by Lucia's calm and careless way of how she described it all. So happy and ironic manner to present it all. Theodore didn't dare to ask anything else, so he kept silent for a second until he came up with something else. What if we'd move on to the village yard again? If we want to get it open, or did you, Lucia, get to say what you wanted? Let's move back home. The young duo walked through the starting positions and started to shovel the yard. The snow layers were about half a meter long, and so the shovels were almost full immediately, which meant that the snow had to be thrown around the yard's corners to get away. Theodore saw it with his left eye that Lucia was keeping almost after every single throw her shoulders out of exhaustion and pressure. Just like Mom. Theodore snapped and decided to raise his intensity. Just like home. When him and Elvira were shoveling, the dog's yard was very large, but with 2 people, it was handled almost in an hour. Theodore was at work, and performance the more active one, due to him having more strength in his arms, and him having more experience using a shovel at high intensity. Phew. That was it. Thank you, Arms, for that, Theodore. I guess you are correct, Theodore replied back, but you could easily hear the sort of disbelief and denial in it. Lucia then gave her last suggestion to her guest. Brr, I think you can agree that here is very cold, and our work was rough. I might need a warm up to it. Theodore didn't say anything to the suggestion, but then he thought that Lucia might be correct, and simply nodded to her. So the 2 moved back to the villa. Inside, Lucia brought Theodore to the living room, and Lucia introduced Theodore to sit on the couch. Inside, Lucia brought Theodore to the living room and instructed the Trevor to sit on a couch. Theodore was once again very pleased and grateful for the chance of luxuries, but it wasn't the first time of that, so he remained silent. Lucia sat next to him and took a woolly blanket for both of them. Lucia took a pillow for herself and offered one for Theodore as well. Theodore asked from his friend about this. What's the idea behind this? What are we doing? He asked while Lucia was offering a pillow for him. Let the warm heal and recharge you after the work of coldness, red cheek. Lucia teased Theodore a bit, while still trying to sound collected and wise. What? Why wouldn't they be red? When we came just right from the cold snowfall. You might be right. Just take a comfortable position and relax. These blankets are truly the most comfortable quality you can ever find. Lucia said and laid down like she was about to fall asleep. Theodore was still skeptical about relaxing, but he stayed shut. Through fascination, he wanted to find out which company had made these blankets and how. He couldn't find any caretaking tips or any sort of marking that might speak of something industrialization or no marketing. Was this blanket made by, well, who else? Theodore thought after his observation. Lucia felt so comfortable in the warmth that she would fall asleep without her even realizing it. After a while, she started to hear some loud noises. Some sounded like footsteps and some sounded like something heavy just fell off the ground. It all felt like they came from the outside of the house. It took some time before Lucia woke up to those sounds, but she was still not entirely aware of her surroundings. Lucia put her hand on the blanket and moved towards Theodore. To her surprise, there was no one to be felt, and that snapped Lucia out of her bed. She also saw snow falling from in front of her windows. From the roof, of course. Lucia immediately understood what was going on and rushed outside of her home. She wasn't even wearing a jacket on the outside. It was all just so surprising and alerting. Lucia saw Theodore on the house's roof with a shovel once again. She shouted to the roof in confusion. What are you doing there? Why didn't you just stay with me in the house? When Theodore heard that, he realized he was caught up and thought that he isn't going to start screaming, especially from the roof. So he pulled back and came back from the roof to the ground. I just couldn't stop it. When I got the taste of work again, what are you doing? I thought we would rest under warm blankets and talk about something. Why you won't stop for a moment? Lucia interrupted Theodore with this time with even more frustrated and angry tone. I have never really stopped, and I couldn't stand the idea of resting in someone else's couch under someone else's blankets and with someone else's pillow. All I was in terms of doing was serving my master of sorts. Theodore reasoned with his decision. Just come in and let's try it again. Just rest. There isn't anything wrong with it. Lucia said back and took a hold from Theodore's hand and brought him back to inside the villa. Back in the living room, Lucia tried to bargain Theodore to rest. What do you find so frightening about taking easy? Theodore didn't respond anything, but just to get Lucia quiet for a question about the subject, he did as Lucia wished. They're not so hard. There's no one you have to impress with your work, Lucia complained to Theodore when when she put her hand on Theodore's forehead. It was so cold that she couldn't believe that was human's forehead. She just couldn't believe that she was touching something so cold from a human. You're cold. Didn't you know that? Lucia said while still trying to comfort him. Theodore took her hand off and replied back, I don't believe I deserve that. Know this. Forgive me. You start to sound like a machine. What is this? Just sit down and let yourself calm down. Okay, I'll try. After 2 minutes, Theodore was getting more and more distressed. But then he managed to finally contain it and be just around and rest. All of it was so alienating. He never really got such compliments, such as this day. He was never asked to rest. He was never really offered any sort of comfort that would be considered more special. He took one deep breath and managed to get calmer. I can get used to this, he still thought, and Lucia presented to him a rhetorical question. Not so bad. What was so uncomfortable after all? Lucia said and put her hand on Theodore's forehead again. This time there was no resistance to it. Just for this day, Theodore whispered something to himself. What? Excuse me, what did you say? Nothing. I'm just pleased by your givings. Lucia sat next to Theodore for the last time during the day. She wanted to still know more about why Theodore was the way he is. But then she'd had to gain his complete trust. Did you like this day? Were my plans any good? Lucia asked. You have organized your ideas very well. And I am very grateful for this chance you have given to me. Theodore replied and held a humble tone. You don't need to thank me, especially after your work was done. Lucia certainly leaned towards Theodore's shoulder and put her head resting on the treble. Theodore didn't know what to do or say for such an act. That he just sat quietly, barely blinking his eyes, while red was spreading around his head. I'm glad to hear that you liked the day. If you'd love to visit us again, let me know. Yes, just as we spoke about it. Do you wish to visit us in some time? Yes, I'm interested. Theodore took a look at the clock and realized that it was already about 4 p.m. and all the red suddenly disappeared. He whispered to Lucia's ear about his plans and that when he thought to leave. I believe I have to leave in these minutes. If you want to ask something, you can still do it. Theodore stated and stood up from the couch, leaving Lucia almost completely supportless, and so she fell down. She only giggled and raised up from the couch as well. Okay, I had a sweet time with you. You helped me and gave me company I rarely even had. Theodore nodded to her and headed towards the entrance. Lucia already said her goodbyes, and Theodore was about to put his shoes on and say his goodbyes until he saw a portrait of the dog's family. The portrait had Mr. Dog in it, with hairs this time, and a woman who looked a bit like Lucia. But the age didn't match quite. Roderick and the woman looked way younger in the picture than in the present time. Could she be Mr. Dog? Theodore thought, But then he asked himself another question. Where, is she now? We don't know, but Theodore collected his head and said goodbyes and left the villa. The weather was again turning into more colder when the sun started to ascend. So Theodore decided to hurry back home before the darkness. And back home, he had no work to do anymore. Lucia was staying in the couch under the same blanket as she wanted to. Lucia was still very puzzled how she could properly gain the boy's trust and open the locks he held in his hand. Then she got an idea how to do it. She went to her room and she went to her mother's room that was used for textile works. 5 minutes later, Roderick arrived back home and he immediately tried to find Lucia so he can present some questions for her. Theodore, back in his home, had to see a surprise when he realized that Elvira still hadn't returned from the Claw Lakes market. But he couldn't help it and started to do his own decisions for the evening, so he did. Theodore shoveled the snow out from all the 4 roofs the travelers had, 3 storages, and the house itself. Luckily, they were all fairly small, and so the work was fairly easy. Theodore also opened his home's yard and went to the base shed to cut the rest of the game he had there. Simple and fast. Simple and fast. It all felt like it when Theodore was alone. Everything during the day up to this point felt exciting, new and happy. Now it feels like the basic routine. No new to be learned, nothing to be mastered, just repeating patterns that were already familiar. After all of it, Theodore went back to his house and just stood in the entrance. He felt something he thought he had a duty to push away. Affection. Affection that went deeper than just friendship. He wasn't able to describe it because he always tried to deny it all and that he didn't deserve it. Theodore was trying to suppress and deny it all, but it got harder and harder. And as he couldn't even describe the feeling properly, he didn't even know what to do with it. Theodore went to the kitchen of the house and prepared some food for himself, but all was once more tasteless. He felt like something awakened inside his head. That was still empty, blank slate, waiting to be fulfilled. Elvira had arrived at the house. After minutes, Theodore had arrived and started to prepare sort of a dinner. It was all over for the evening, at least how Theodore felt it. All over. He was so filled with conflicting thoughts that he remembered almost nothing from the evening. Hope tomorrow brings me another brighter head, he thought. To be continued. The clock was about to start ringing, but Theodore, with his usual style, shut it off like from a reflex. Much to his surprise, he found himself from his bed. He couldn't remember anything from yesterday's evening, and so he really didn't know what to expect from today. The feeling of unknown had almost disappeared, and now Theodore finally felt himself being normal again.
He didn't have anything special for today outside of the meeting held by Mr. Dark. But even then, he knew all of the people there more or less. Also, it was about something he was already familiar and comfortable with. Not too many surprises and nothing to be interested in. What are you thinking now? We need a plan. And it's not supposed to be a surprise. Theodore thought back to his feeling. What are you thinking now? We need a plan. And it's not supposed to be a surprise. Theodore thought back to his feelings over the evening this morning. We'll invent something new, it's sure. He thought, and rised up from his bed and walked towards the house's kitchen and decided to take a loaf of bread. So Evie didn't need to wake up for help. Because of the timetables and plans for the day, Theodore once again didn't have anything too important to start without compromising its success. After the breakfast was done, Theodore took a piece of paper and a pen for himself to take some notes and plans for tomorrow, and so he would write them down. Theodore knew that the old men of the village were incredibly eager about the new plans and village-wide meetings, so he decided to start the stroll into the workshop right now, even before the clock could hit 7. The old seniors would already be there, so why not to hop along? And so Theodore started the trip to the dog's workshop. When Theodore finally arrived to the workshop, the old seniors were there, already 2 inches off the ground, while waiting in the workshop's front yard. Every single of them were excited and eager to suggest different outcomes. How they would reconstruct new details, like new tunes or shapes, or whatever they could come up with their minds. Theodore wasn't surprised that, especially the old men, were the first in the scene, despite them being over half an hour there even before the initial meeting time. As the clock finally closed into the time the meeting was initiated to be held, Roderick and Gustav arrived to the workshop and opened the workshop's doors. All the men moved to the dining hall of the workshop, and Gustav declared that the meeting has begun. It all went as the old seniors predicted. Roderick showed them his own hand-drawn sketch and it explained. These sketches present the most wanted models for the urban population. Here we care more about how good our work fits into the user's hands. Urban population doesn't care about looks. That is why it took me for a while to perfect these. All of you have used your own techniques. Then we have a perfect opportunity to improve your skills there. Everything else we have is about your opinion on the matter. Shall we take them in use? Most of the workers were about to rise and shout yes, before the other one of the Alwell brothers stood up and interrupted each person's thought in the room. Also, Gustav didn't look yet quite happy. The Allwall's older brother, Milo, started to explain his own opinion on the matter. But weren't we here to discuss about us increasing our production as well? If yes, we have to answer our 2 questions at the same time, not independently. In the side of surface treatment, we have already a burning hurry, and if we complicate our designs with extra marks and tools on them, then we'll just deepen our trouble there. After those words were said, Roderick looked like he was completely surprised about the situation around him. He replied to his suggestion with controlled but noticeable bitter tone, like he couldn't believe that he forgot something important like this. You have a point, Mr. Alwall. To everyone's surprise, Roderick looked like he was knocked out a bit. How could this be? What he got wrong? Gustav couldn't look at his friend anymore, so he rised up and started a monologue which felt like it has been in his head for a while. The accountant shouldn't give his own opinions on the quality of the work, but now I have to stand in. I am sure you have all given your finest to us, but it's not enough anymore. Roderick has, for the eternity of his life, made sure that everything is organized and well planned beforehand. Now I would give my statement how I would expand it. We all excel at something, right? Whether it was sawing, tuning, painting, or spinning papers. So, to boost our production, I have come up with my own work model for us. We split you into 4 groups, each one with their own objective. The first group saws and makes all the blanks for the future steps in production. Group number 2 hones and refines these blanks, giving them their own well-known form. Group number 3 refines the products even further and adds the new markings on the wood surface. These 2 groups especially have to keep an eye on those new models and how they are made. Group number 4 takes care of the surface treatment. Now, how I would fix the situation if one group gets busy or even overwhelmed by work. Every single group whose step takes place before the overwhelmed groups. You'll slow down your production and move to help them. Keeping our reserves and storages in check are the most important moves I can imagine when we are about to make a large expansion. How about you, my fine friends? Are you with me? Roderick immediately raised his arm to show his agreement, and so started everyone else. Organized and unified was something that the workshop has been needing for a while now. They'd finally get a vision which would help them to get through the uncertain future. So it was clear and decided. The new sketches Roderick had made and Gustav's new working model was taken into use. Only thing that mattered anymore was who would form these 4 groups. It wasn't really even a question. Everyone knew each other's skills well enough that everyone knew who would be the best fit for each role. Every one of the decisions were made in a matter of minutes, and now it was all said and done. Roderick decided to test this new build a bit, and when the meeting was said to be over, he ordered each of his groups to leave the dining hall, each with their own turns. Theodore was going in the second group, and he left right on time. Roderick was still a bit troubled by himself forgetting to make a new working model in order to try and accelerate productions. But luckily, Gustav saved his hide during the last minute. After the meeting was over, Theodore decided to leave the workshop and move backwards home. Theodore was about to leave until Roderick suddenly stopped him. Roderick had his fist pointing towards Theodore and his knuckles were facing on the floor. He said to his friend that the following and opened his fist. Lucia told me about your yesterday's visit. She asked me to give this to you, and also, thank you for your efforts. It wasn't necessary, but you have always managed to surprise everyone with your appointment and diligence. Theodore kept looking at his master's eyes, and after Roderick finished his sentence, he dared to look down, and he almost gasped. It was a heart-shaped crochet with a card on it. Roderick gave the gift for Theodore, who took it like it was forced into his hands, and he looked very repulsed. He moved a bit on the sidelines from everyone else's attention to the corner of the meeting room and started to read the text that was from Lucia, it seemed. My dear friend Theodore Trevor, we're to call you that after all these events. I'm still, during the moment you read this letter, as grateful for all the deeds you did and gave us during your visit to our home. And I will say it once more. Thank you. If you get this letter, would you respond with a phone call if you have one, about 8 or 10 p.m.? Those are times when I'll most likely respond. Have a lovely day and I wait for Christmas. Kind regards, Lucia Dark. Below the text was also Dark's phone number. It all started to feel uncertain and now for Theodore once again. Someone actually being interested and caring about his life. Roderick was already gone, so the youngling really couldn't ask from him, did Lucia really mean all those words she said? Or in this case, wrote to her letter. Theodore decided to still move back home. He can ask all those questions tomorrow. During his walk back home, Theodore was stuck, reading that letter again and again, just to get what it intended. But after some time, Theodore started to realize something. Not necessarily about the letter, but about himself. Roderick had already gotten back to his villa and went to his own room with multiple pieces of paper in his hands. Lucia herself had just prepared the day's meal and was making the table. Roderick had just prepared his typewriter before Lucia called him to eat. So he complied and he went to eat his daughter's meal. Did you give my letter for Theodore? Did he like it? Lucia asked. Roderick simply replied back. Yes, I did, and yes, he did. Even though he didn't really know how Trevor would actually feel about it. Lucia couldn't come up with anything new to ask, given to her father's statement. That was short, simple, and clear. So she just kept eating until Roderick decided to ask something about his daughter's life. What is that you won't invite your friends from school to here, or the other way around? Contrast it to the way you treat Theodore. You sound like a different person when it's about him. What is it? It's just that we aren't really friends. At least I don't see them so close to us. Contrast that to Theodore. He helps us unlike the girls from school. And he's an actual hard-working and active man, which takes effort to find, especially from my age group. Lucia replied back. And so Roderick got enough knowledge for him and kept eating. After the meal was enjoyed, the dogs returned to their own daily routines. Lucia was the more excited and eager one out of the two. Roderick had to just make new plans for the new formula and for the future. So there wasn't anything new to his day. Lucia felt excitement because she was about to gain a connection to Theodore outside from the usual social interactions. She also believed that she had created a trustworthy link with Theodore. So she could finally get him open up and give up his asceticism. Surely sometime. She thought while knitting a new pair of woolly scarf for herself. It was all so peaceful and comforting for her. Her skills handling the knits and wool were the last memories from her mother, her work and achievements. At the same time, she knew that what she was doing without having the strength or a size of a carpenter, just one's finger precision. Also, Lucia loved creating new clothes and trying to create new models for her work. Every time new, and so a new success. The feeling was for her surprisingly important because of her school that was in Claw Lake. In school, Lucia was very good. In her performance was nothing wrong. It was that the other people around there, the usual popular girls like people
careless, even irresponsible and childish. Maybe that might sound over exaggeration, but that was how Lucia felt. At least after she got Theodore in her life. He was a perfect opposite for the people Lucia had connected in school. Lucia was raised under a clear set of principles, and Roderick always used them. Responsibility was one of them. Lucia never had anything against them, but the not so responsible people around her really didn't excel at deepening those principles. Productivity was another. It was not among them really a respected trait. When Lucia got things that weren't part of her group, she almost felt superior compared to them, and she felt the only one when she was doing something alone and without their interruptions. Also, around anyone else who wasn't an adult, Lucia had a hard time to speak with them without sounding weird. This carried all the way to home. Because of Theodore's more mature and responsible outlook, she found it easier to connect with him and, more importantly, speak with him. Despite the effect of her school's buddies were visible and hearable, with Theodore, Lucia didn't have to try sound like a cool, rebellious, careless youngling, but just herself. Being good at things she wanted to be good, and just live by the principles she was raised with. Being good at things she wanted to be good were also alienating for many other students who lived in an urbanized town, not a rural village. Different views clashing in her life every single day weren't the most pleasing experience, especially when Lucia had already grown to the rural lifestyle. Roderick was by the man's words, spinning and rolling papers around his typewriter and office. Despite the family's very different line of work and places, they still shared the same passion and happiness for it. Also, the Dark's family was known for their activity and diligence almost over everything. That was something Lucia was especially afraid of. Her pressure being a Dark while living in the midst of people who were almost opposite of the Dark's expectations. People without desire to learn new things, nor anything similar passion for any sort of physical or mental activity. When the evening finally started to fall, work could take a short break and the Dark's phone rang. Roderick was the one who picked it up, but Lucia told that she can take care of it. Hey, the other Trevor speaking. Lucia Dark listening. So you got my letter? Did you like it? Lucia tried to get Theodore's own opinion on the letter. That was more detailed than her father's simpler replique. Yes, indeed. That is why I called you. And what you made me realize about at least myself. But before we keep going, please tell me, do you really would call me a friend? Theodore asked back. Yes. I'd say it that way. Perhaps even more. Even more. Even more. She repeated perhaps even more while trying to sound more seductive. Okay. I knew I could believe in your words, just like Roderick. Oh, thank you. What if I tell you that was small good from you, at least for me? This means I have gained his trust, Lucia thought until Theodore interrupted her. So, what is that I realized something about myself? I'm too afraid to show my care or my feelings. Whether it's for myself or someone else. But because of you, I finally recognized it. And finally I can try to get rid of such traits in myself. Doesn't that sound sweet? You're welcome. What else we had right now to talk about? I guess nothing more. No, wait! Lucia quickly interrupted this time and looked up to her father. They spoke about some sort of a plan for the next week. Yes, and you handle the rest. Ask him about it. Then I'll tell you what is so important about that meeting. Roderick said with a tone he would only really use in the workshop. It had the same sense of worth, authority, and responsibility. Yes, and if he really is comfortable opening up to us, it might even end up successfully. Lucia made her own opinion on the matter as well. And when the plan was made, Lucia went back to the phone, so the dialogue between the phone lines kept going. Lucia asked Theodore to visit the Dark's house once again during the next week, this time having Roderick in the house with them. The meeting would be after work, and they'd make some sort of a deal during the visit. Yes, that sounds good. I'll find a good day for that. What about the deal you spoke? Is it important or big? Theodore asked in his interest. Lucia replied back. You will get it when you are here. But I am sure that it's not going to be at least a big surprise for you. All right. Goodbye then. Good night. Good night. And so the call ended. The phone call was a big relief for both teams, and they were about to open their locks and understand themselves a bit more back again. All of it getting better and better. Lucia told her father about her plans for Monday, and he also was at least a bit excited for it. He saw this as a chance to tighten his ties with the Trevor family even more than already had been, and his daughter was very close for finding herself a romantic partner, at least how Roderick saw it. They both decided that it was better given how much clock was all ready to go to sleep, and so the Dark's villa turned silent and sleepy in seconds. It was all now calm, and at the same time exciting. Everything went as wanted, or even better than expected. Sunday was over, and the new work had begun. Everything was set in stone, and everyone knew their role. Theodore arrived at the workshop with his usual style, 5:30 a.m., and everything seemed to go according to the old formula. But this time, all of the old seniors were at the workshop almost an hour before their supposed arrival time. This was a big welcome, because now everyone just had to get used into their new place, and so the production could start. All the surface treaters, Alwool brothers, arrived at 8 o'clock as they were expected. But they got some slight and subtle joking about them not being the most passionate men. But them being patient and thick-skinned painters, they just let that slide past them. Because of the new working model was still just taken into practice, it took some time to get completely optimized, something one day couldn't really yet solve. And today was mostly used for trying to get used to it all. Someone still worked under the same old model, someone didn't know yet how to keep going with the new model after one product was completed, and all the new designs for the products also the time to properly learn in an optimal way of manufacturing. Still, the mood was at its peak, and everyone was still eager to test and experiment. It took merely a blink of an eye, and the day felt like it was already over. In an eager experimental group, it was almost disappointing, and no one was really prepared to leave. However, their families and duties back home called them back. And so they decided to end the day at 4 o'clock, as they always did. Theodore thought that he might have an opportunity to speak with Roderick for a little and ask him about the visit they spoke about last night. Mr. Dark himself was not quite pleased by this sudden abrupt mentioning of it, but he thought that Lucia would be happy to see Theodore once again. And Lucia had already been preparing for his next visit. So what Mr. Dark did, he simply nodded to the request. And so the two began their stroll to Roderick's villa, where Lucia would already be waiting in them. As the two get marching in the winter, they both were still very silent, because they were just simply tired after the day. But through time, when they finally get to Dark's villa, Theodore and Roderick were waiting on its door, and so they knocked on it, and Lucia opened it. So by this way, the final meeting of the day could begin. To be continued. Theodore was welcomed back to the Dark's villa. It was almost like they'd been preparing for the visit at least 2 days, despite it only being one full morning. Theodore and Roderick went and walked to the Dark's entrance, and Lucia welcomed them all with an even more warmer tone than before. The house wasn't anything new anymore for Theodore, but it still amazed him by its looks and size. Roderick was taking off his boots while Theodore already had gotten his smaller shoes and was looking at his master. Roderick took a portrait from the entrance dresser and looked very closely at it. Suddenly, a sad gesture raised to his face, which Theodore could not miss. Let us get to the table, there we will talk a little bit. Roderick stated and collected his mind together. Theodore nodded, left his bag on the entrance, and walked with his master to the dining room. There Lucia was already expecting them. She had something in the cooker, but she didn't tell or speak anything of it, so Theodore didn't keep it as important. It was probably the Dark's dinner or something. Roderick had a piece of paper on his place on the table that looked like the testament from a few days ago. Theodore wasn't yet quite sure how to take it, but he quickly connected the pieces together. Roderick started to speak again about plans, of course, because what else he'd be speaking of? So I believe you remember that day when we spoke about this. I'd like to bring them up also to my heir, Lucia. If this testament is just fine for you, Theodore and I will find witnesses who will accept its assignment. After all, it is about my family's fortunes, and something that will be yours one day. Lucia looked at Theodore and cracked a smile, like she tried to tell that she was completely okay with it, without saying anything out loud. While Lucia was not your first option to your inheritance division, Theodore turned back on Roderick and asked, "Back in time, you know what happened. And also, because she thought that there will be some other and better choices available. The rest, I believe you can guess." Roderick finished that sentence, and Lucia sat down next to Theodore. Lucia continued her father's speech. "Also, you're important for me. You're important for father and me." Lucia said, but couldn't help herself being stuck in her words and blushing a little. When her father was around, Roderick got it and shifted his focus away, like he didn't even watch towards her, nor was he hearing anything. "Thank you, both of you." Theodore realized that he wasn't going to get any further answers, at least not under these circumstances, so he decided to let it slide. Surprisingly, Roderick kept the discussion going. What is that Lucia, you find so important in him? Roderick asked slightly sarcastically. Lucia was a bit flustered after this and tried to get the attention elsewhere. I believe that our food is already prepared, she said and rushed to the cooker. Theodore looked at her with worried gestures in his face, given how awkward she looked, but then moved his focus towards Roderick and remembered that question he asked from Lucia. Theodore's face started to get pale, and he shifted his look towards at his hands. After melting that question for a while, he squeezed his hands into a fist and let out a sigh, like he was ashamed or afraid over something. This emotional surge was put on stop when Lucia put a plate, fork and knife in front of him. Then he remembered what he learned about feelings from Lucia. Then Theodore thought that maybe he can tell Roderick about it. Time went faster than expected during the brief emotional surge. While Theodore was letting his emotions get into his head on the surface, Roderick and Lucia had already taken some food for them and had made their table. They both encouraged Theodore also to take some piece to himself. So he did. Only after Theodore took some salt from the cooker, he realized that the meat used here was the tenderloins he brought during his first visit. He couldn't help it and said it out loud. "Have you saved all of this all the way here, Mr. Duck?" Roderick let his usual calm laugh, which for Theodore felt very fatherly. Roderick also replied back to him, "Yes, if you mean your gift, Mr. Trevor." When Theodore finally heard Roderick call him a mister, it made his blood stop for a second. He felt like this is not happening, and that Roderick was just polite. But then again, why it would be obsolete? Kind of like Lucia's letter. Theodore thought, took some time to calm down, and sat to the table. I certainly did not expect anything like this to happen today. Shall I call this a miracle? Theodore thought while he was eating the salt from his plate. Suddenly, Lucia leaned at his shoulder and was about to ask something until she looked at Roderick. The man realized it and started to pretend again like he wasn't seeing or hearing anything. So Lucia dared to ask, "Do you like it?" "It is the best recipe I have come up with. From you. To just us together." Lucia whispered and leaned back to her seat. Theodore already realized the ingredients for the salt, but when someone else said it like that, it came out of nowhere and felt even nicer. He simply decided to answer the question with simple thanks and moved on as well as he could. Roderick was the first one to leave the table because he ate the fastest, and so he left to his office. After this, Lucia decided to talk with Theodore again in more personal matters. "If you really believe that our friendship works, Father just wants us to share the dog's fortune as you know it. But under these circumstances we are in, there might be a better option." Theodore started to catch up with Lucia's point, and she snapped when he heard the word friendship. After some visible hesitation by Lucia, he responded, "Is there something I didn't get? What was about the letter you found, calling me friend so weird? Now, I am going to be honest here. No hiding anymore. Lucia Dog, you are the only one who appreciates me in a way no one else does. You tell me the sweetest compliments I've ever gotten and give me more happiness than anyone has given to me. Especially when you are around me.
I like you, perhaps more than I'm allowed to, Theodore said, but for him, they were more than just words. Finally, he was able to speak about sentimental matters without getting flustered or embarrassed. Also, he finally got out from his head he liked and cared for people around him. No weird tension over it or some sort of guilt. Lucia soon cut this relief, but it wasn't anything negative. Instead, it went deeper into Theodore's skin. More than you were allowed to. Where that came from then? But you got me there. I was just not ready to tell you how I really feel. Theodore, you are the most mature person of my age I can think of. Also one of the wisest of our livelihood that I know. I don't care where you are from, wealthy, poor. You have proven that you are capable and skilled and strong beginning of a man. Lucia said, and put her hand inside Theodore's large, bigger hand and closed it into a fist. If you're like more than I'm allowed to means I love you, I can say that you're not alone. If you'd wish to say it that way, I wouldn't. You're correct. Here goes nothing. I love you. You make me feel it in a way no one else has ever done. There is nothing wrong having feelings over someone else, right? So you already confessed. So do I. I love you, Theodore Trevor. My brave, strong and diligent Theodore. Always heard nothing but good about you. And now I have witnessed with all my own eyes that you are the man I needed in the middle of my age. Thank you, Lucia. Thank you. Why wouldn't just call me Lucy? When it's all the way, I'll tell the father, okay? He might have already known about this. After Theodore said that, they both cracked a laugh and finished their dinner. So they moved on to Roderick's office. Roderick's reaction to the turn of events were very minor and happy, like he was trying to imply, I knew this was going to happen. A relief for both teens in the house. Theodore took a look at the clock and already realized that Evie might be already expecting him. He told her about his suspicions and started to prepare his departure and left to the villa's entrance. Lucia came up to her boyfriend and they kept talking about something not so important or anything remarkable. Theodore put his shoes back on his feet and went out from the house. Lucia stopped him halfway through the dog's front yard. Theodore had already moved outside the house's entrance, and Lucia ran at him with bare socks against the cold and icy ground. Theodore turned at her, and he was immediately greeted with a hug. The last time they've hugged each other was unknown and awkward time, at least for Theodore due to lack of knowledge about her love or feelings or care. Theodore didn't hesitate all this time. He hugged back, and when he just realized what happened, because the Trevor was visibly taller than the dog, he leaned down a bit to put his cheek against Lucia's cheek. So they hugged each other even tighter and pushed their cheeks together in a way that only could have worked and warmed them in the chilling wind and cold winter. After a few seconds, they stopped, said goodbyes, and so Theodore left the dog's villa, and Lucia stayed still a while outside of her house and waved back to his boyfriend. It took the meal to be enjoyed. It took more than just that. It took so long that after Theodore left out the villa and had just arrived back home, he realized the unspoken intention of the visit, to get the two closer, and even more important, get the two aware of Roderick's future plans. And then again, it was a successful visit, and probably it reached to its goal. Also, Theodore and Lucia got to confess each other their feelings,
Bit an exaggerated way, but still. Back in Theodore's home, Elvira had picked up the Theodore's corpse from the Theodore's storage and had started to cut it by herself. She really didn't know what she was doing with it, and when Theodore opened the house's door, she let out an uncontrolled gasp and almost dropped her knife. Theodore then, out of sheer shock from the ground sound, ran towards the kitchen and was completely taken by surprise. He had never seen Evie trying to gut Gamel's corpse, and she was never frightened by her son's presence. "What was that for a moment?" Theodore asked with a sense of authority in the situation. Well, Butcher was when I started this. You've been doing this for a while now, and I thought to do it by myself this time. It couldn't be that hard. Evie soon said to get her deep into her defense. Theodore then walked up to the corpse his mother was cut in, and his mood saw a big drop. "Mother, you did it wrong. You don't cut the hamstring straight from the corpse. You first cut the legs out from the corpse." Yeah, do it then yourself, Mr. Repressor. But you aren't better than I am, especially here. And also, do you really know you have to rely on every task just yourself? Evie shouted to her son and pointed at the house's goodness. Despite her visible jealousy and envying over Theodore's skills with a knife, she left the situation because she didn't want to make it even more embarrassing for her. "Guess I'll have to take it from here now on," Theodore told to himself and started to move with the knife around the door's corpse. And despite some difficulties, it was over in no time. So began a passive and calm moment for a while, until the evening. In the Darksville was for both family members a happy time. Roderick had even better outlook on what he will leave behind when he dies, and Lucia had found her first person she could say loved, aside from her parents and other family members. Even Lucia herself couldn't quite guess that she was going to be with some crofter from the same village, but they were here now, and she was at her happiest. In her room, Lucia took a look at her recent class portraits from school, and she felt disappointment rising in herself. None of the boys or girls in her class were really all that eager when talking about their future, nor were they as motivated to learn anything new. This was something Lucia called alienating for herself. Lucia put the photograph down and started to move on downstairs, as she wasn't expecting Roderick to meet her in the middle of the stairs. But there he was, out from his office. "Lucy, I'm all happy for you. I really am. But I'm also a bit surprised by your choice. Was the youth in urban environment really so bad that you'd choose someone whose quality of life is significantly lower? If it was so, I hold no questions over you, and Theodore, I see why you got affected by him." Lucia got blushed by this, but she simply replied to it. "It is more than just that. Don't you agree that he will be an awesome host for our family? If someone would agree on that, it's you," Lucia said and walked past her father. Roderick stood still a while, but then he also left the staircase. Lucia was still surprised that her father was there, so she decided to ask a little about it. "Shouldn't you be in your office?" "No, I just finished my work for today. But speaking of it, I have something to show you about my plans I've done. Organizing is the key to everything they even when Gustav knew how to enhance it even further, it still does not mean I'm wrong." Roderick said and brought Lucia to his office, where he'd present his business plans. Lucia was a bit confused by all of this. "Father, why do you tell me?" Why father would tell me his plans about the workshop to me, especially when I haven't really done anything to it? Lucia kept thinking, but when Roderick pulled out a sketch from Claw Lake's biggest marketplace, she started to get an idea where he might come from. As Roderick kept explaining his sketch, it confirmed Lucia's all guesses. It was a sketch from Claw Lake's biggest marketplace, and there was also a lot of different drawings from different products out of wood. Roderick also brought an empty A4 paper and wrote there, "Signed by," and the rest of it was empty space. There we have our most recent drawings from our models. I thought that the next time when we are going to the marketplace of Claw Lake, I'll bring these drawings with me and I'll try to find local carpenters and form a connections with them. Just so I don't surprise you when I will leave you there alone. Lucia was shaken by this. Why would Roderick try to do something like this? What is he trying? To get hold from the open markets as well? Lucia took the empty A4 and turned it around. There she saw a text which said, "I accept a partnership deal with Dark's workshop and say contact to its leader, Roderick Richard Dark." You start to get it now? Mr. Dark asked from puzzled Lucia. Yes, but why haven't you tried this on previous years? Lucia asked back. Because there has no need for it yet. Because there has been no need for it yet, Roderick said to his daughter. He couldn't help but ask from her, "Is it okay that you'll be in the marketplace alone from now on? Because this might take time and effort from me, so I won't be able to support you there anymore." Which Lucia said like she felt like she was insulted at the moment. Of course it'll be okay. Good. Roderick sat back and took his typewriter and other tools, put them back to their closets, and they left the office once again. Roderick went to the living room and picked up the newspaper written by Vasa. Lucia sat next to him, trying to read between the lines without them noticing. They even already started to fall darkness and get in the village. Back in the traverse, Theodore had gotten back from his hunt again. This time returning with 2 big deers he caught from the family's fields. He brought them to the base shed and stepped inside their hut. In their hut, Evie had prepared soup from the door Theodore caught earlier during the day, while awaiting her son. She took a look at her brochure she got from Claw Lake's marketplace. After Theodore had arrived at the house, they both took their own plates and started to eat the soup. It didn't take long enough until the hungry two had eaten their plates empty and were full. So Elvira took the soup pot and left it outside to cool down, and then bringing it to the fridge. Theodore, out of curiosity, took a look at the brochure Evie was having. It was a compilation of all the sales from the market and all the participants of it. Nothing too special, so Theodore let it be. During the hunt, the time went like its speed was doubled. Theodore took a look at the clock and expected it to be at least 7:45 p.m. But no, it was already 9:07 p.m. So he decided to end the day there. Theodore did his usual evening routines and would say goodnight for Elvira before bed. But before he could go to sleep, Evie asked one thing from her son. Have you taken at least 2 days off with your hunts? Theodore was visibly hesitant by this question and tried to hide his embarrassment, so he replied quickly, yes. Elvira couldn't help but crack a small smile and went back to her evening routines. She looked like she was happy about something. Theodore came up with a conclusion that this didn't mean anything, so he didn't pay attention to it. He stepped into his room and threw himself into a horizontal plane on the bed. Out of all the day's events, Theodore's mind went back to Lucia and their relationship. Finally, Theodore didn't feel awkward or guilt over liking someone. He wasn't ready to say love just yet, but something very, very close. What was it that Theodore just couldn't take her out of his head anymore? Maybe he could call her tomorrow, just as long as it could have been something. Why and what else it could have been? Or was it still Theodore trying to suppress his emotions? Maybe the answers will soon emerge. To be continued. And so the family of Trevor and the family of Dark got together, and the future for Roderick's workshop started to look a lot more brighter and clearer. Everything, especially for the young new pair, was everything they could have hoped for. A person that they can count on and be sure that they are bringing their best in. The Tuesday morning began as it should. Everyone woke up as normally as they would, and they also had their usual routines in check. Lucia woke up at 6:30 a.m. while Roderick had already left for work. Some expectations could have been here and there. Lucia's own mornings were usually very calm and slow. Make fresh breakfast, get some time for school, and walk about 5 kilometers to the school itself. So were also today's routines. Lucia made herself porridge and white bread with some foie gras and meat. After the breakfast, Lucia took her backpack and took all the necessary books for the day and her jacket for the cold day. Despite Lucia's affection and feelings towards Theodore, the two were quite different. Lucia was a lot more open for her feelings and was usually very pleased about her school, and she loved learning new things there. Theodore was a lot more insecure and suppressed about his feelings, and many times he doesn't care what he does as long as it feels like it's part of his duty and challenging enough. He does it no matter what it was, as long as it fulfills his feeling of duty. Lucia cared that she learned something, and Theodore more and more about that he can prove himself, that he indeed is capable for everything. Also, Lucia's morning were a lot calmer and slower. She woke up noticeably later and started her trip to the school at the last possible minutes. Also, a clear-cut difference between the two were how they felt about themselves with each other, despite their last meaning. Lucia felt joy, relief and safety around her new partner. Despite all the previous events, she couldn't help but feel a bit worried over Theodore's physical and mental health. Theodore, on the other hand, despite his obvious liking of Lucia, felt anxiety and pressure. Whether it was something that had to be struck into his head, or the fact that he dared to be in a relationship with someone significantly richer and wealthier than his entire family. Every single time he tried to think and why he even felt that way, it all started to get apathic. The man's big weakness. Despite her worries, Lucia was still generally optimistic about things around her. Sure, we will get him into find peace, she thought. She had no hurry to anywhere because her school began at 8 because her school began at 8 a.m. and she was already prepared at 7 a.m. Despite the time gap, the stroll was still very long and the roads weren't in the best conditioning during winter time, so she had to leave already pretty much by now. Claw Lake, located to the northern side of Lucia's home village. So she could have passed through the Trevor's household along the way. Perhaps she could have stopped to say hello. No, unfortunately. She didn't know where Theodore lived, and so she let that slide and kept walking towards school. Claw Lake was very compact and a small city by its size, but the life there was still very social and active. Wealth for the towns was produced by water power, fishing and industrial manufacturing. Being small by its size, everything you can really think about the towns or cities were under just 1/2 kilometer away from you. And if you happened to be in the middle of the town itself. Despite Claw Lake's immense success as a town, it also expanded towards north about 50. Despite Claw Lake's immense success as a town, it also expanded towards north about 15 kilometers. That area of land was full of rivers and woodlands owned by the locals. Lucia's college she had started a year ago was built to the northern side of the Claw Lakes town, so she walked every week past the town's important points of interest, specifically the marketplace. It was a large open spot, which could have been an agricultural exhibition of its own sorts. Every single form of rural livelihoods had its own place from there. To every single tool, to every single machine, to every single part of a machine, from every single company you could have just imagined. Lucia and Roderick had been there many times to buy themselves all the rest that could not have been produced in their fields. They also went the most active hunters, whether because the lack of time or interest. Their home village also didn't have any lakes or rivers that they could have been considered a reliable source of fish. Lucia herself bought a new silk and strings for herself if her storages was running low. When Lucia saw the handwork block from the marketplace, she immediately remembered her father's idea she was presented. It wasn't sure could it work because most of the work around wood and carpentry in Claw Lake almost always have been connected to boats one way or another. This didn't mean they could have been any help, but to Lucia, the situation sounded a bit tricky and uncertain. Worries aside, she got into her school, and it was time for her day's first subject. Lucia's day was her school's longest, consisting of mathematics, physics, history, geography, and after that 2 hours of her optional subject, handwork. Her day was not that special from the usual college student's life, but this time she was seeing some changes in herself. She didn't lament out loud when something felt harder than usual for her, and her social life just was starting to get more and more adult-centered. Her bodies, let's just say, weren't the same anymore for her. After some time spent with Roderick and Theodore, Lucia found herself being way more excited about the idea of speaking to her teachers, which was that rare, but it had certainly amplified in her head. Lucia throughout the day was living her usual school life, but this time there was something she almost predicted. Whenever she was with her friends, it started to feel distant because she didn't really find casual joking around and funny anymore. It was more and more like amusing or slightly frustrating. Disrespecting teachers, spreading rumors, and pretty much everything you could just come up with felt empty activities without a reason. Lucia knew what was in her head and what it was. She didn't yet know how to properly phrase the idea in her head, though. During the last lesson in Lucia's day, she thought that she can now ask the question that puzzled her head from this morning.
The lesson was about to end and students were already ready to leave. But Lucia wanted to ask something from her teacher, Mistress Rusa Spikes. This may not be the question to be asked here, but do you, Mistress Spikes, believe that boat workers and carpenters can cooperate with each other, or are their professions really all that different? No, they aren't. Oh, where do I know? All I know under my profession, you young lady, is that they both work with wood and try to use it to make the practical and aesthetic design. Just like we do. However, if I am to be trusted in your question scenario, working with both has larger emphasis on the surface treatment and bending the wood. That is all I know. Thank you, Mr. Spikes. Why, you young lady, asked that from me? Have you wondered of buying yourself a boat, or has your father, what was his name again? Roderick Dark. Yes. Has he planned on making boat for you or what? No, Mr. Spikes. Well, what is it then, young lady? He apparently has plans to form a co-working deal with boat makers here. That is all I know now. Lucia replied back and started to prepare her departure. And so her school day was over. Lucia walked back to her home and started to prepare a meal for herself, and when her father would arrive. Not long in her home, completely alone, Lucia started to feel like she missed someone. This was not usual for her. Lucia always thought that missing someone is not relevant or necessary, because you can always contact them one way or another. This wasn't even anything usual feelings of Miss Duck. It felt like excitement and sorrow at the same time. She couldn't describe it properly, but something was off. Then she thought about Theodore, and her heart skipped a beat. Is he okay? When he'll be here? What he'd bring us next time? How he feels about himself? All those questions began to call up in Lucia's mind until she decided to try and call to him. Bit dumb she felt for herself when she remembered that they didn't even have the Trevor's phone number. So then she thought to do some other things during the month's first day. Go and visit the workshop for once again. To fulfill the idea, she had to wait for tomorrow. Roderick and Lucia didn't have any future changing discussions today neither. Mornings repeated themselves, and everything went just as people expected it to go forward. One thing Lucia realized about her was that Roderick was able to slightly reduce the feeling of miss she had. While Lucia's father was around yesterday, she was able to forget her unfortunate feelings for a while. But now in the morning, once again alone, she felt only together with herself. Without nowhere to concentrate her attention, her feelings started to emerge on the surface, and Theodore with them. Lucia managed to get rid of these unfortunate feelings from her head with the usual positive thinking. Also, she came up with something about Claw Lake's marketplace when she walked past by it. What if she'd bring Theodore with her? It could especially be important for the boy who has not been there before. Theodore's mother, Elvira, had been in the marketplace many times, but Theodore had never. He has usually been hunting, loading up new sets of ammo, or doing something else at the moment. The only few exceptions when Theodore was the one who bought something to the house, it was usually components for new cartridges and ammunition, or something else that was brought inside the village. Back when Simon was still alive, before the accident,
He always kept telling how bad fit Theodore was outside their home. Also, Simon himself didn't see any point to try and buy goods outside of their home village. At least until the urbanization started to affect the world around him. Even when he finally started to understand the profits and advantages of neighboring cities, he never admitted anything to public. That is why Theodore had not ever even seen the world outside of his home village. Simon's criticism and despises of himself and the urbanization in general were still stuck deep in his subconsciousness. Elvira didn't care any of them, and she was more open-minded for changes. And again, she was the one who visited there the most, and even brought a fraction of the treasurer's foods from there.
Theodore was in his base shed once again, this time cleaning it up and cutting all the corpses that were there to create more room for new game to be hanged. Knife was built in Theodore's big and strong hands. Knife was like built in Theodore's big and strong hands, and he learned many secrets and techniques for the job. Cleaning all the blood, fat, and all the other stains was another story. All Theodore had was a simple water hose, which was always during the wintertime frozen and stuck. Even when it could have worked, the water was at its warmest as warm as a human hand. So really it didn't help at all trying to get rid of the fat stains. The best he had was a simple iron brush, turpentine and steel wool. Because of the very insufficient cleaning methods and lack of proper resources, it took 3 hours to clean up the small base shed Theodore had, and he was tired and consumed by the work he had done. Tomorrow he could go hunt again. After his short gap, let's just say that. But not today anymore. Theodore went back to his home, and he was greeted with Evie's ever so bitter and bit jealous greetings. Evie kept spilling the same milk again and again. She always complained about her weak body and how Theodore does not know how to help her. Theodore always had forgotten how he only takes care of everyone else and he always tries to impress everyone around him without a second thought. This time though, things were different. Theodore had found himself someone he cared about more than anything else he had. And Evie's constant mocking of them finally reached the breaking point. Theodore hit the dining room's table with his large fist and finally tried to bring an end to the tensions Elvira just kept feeding and feeding. I've had enough! What is it that you won't even consider everything I have done to us? What is it? And when I, in your words, only take care of everyone else around me, I still bring money to us. I am not going to talk about the same thing anymore. Keep rolling the same words in your mouth. I'm not going to respond to them anymore. Theodore lashed at his mother. After those words were said, Elvira started to get somber and sadder, until she started sobbing and tearing. I know. It just that you. It is just that you are 15 years old boy, not even old enough to drink, and you have to manage a household all by yourself. Simon only yelled at you when something that a girl wanted, and I'm not capable enough to teach you anything. You are a child in a world way before your time. Ever since you've been born, your life has been just performing and performing with no time to breathe in between. No time to slow down and reflect a little bit. Just like Simon.
have said all these nasty things about your work. I have just been jealous of their life. Their children especially. They have time to be children. They play with pine cows while their parents do the hardest work for the farm. You were not gifted with such luxury. Especially the fact that my son serves the same people who couldn't bring their children a childhood where they had at least a few years of peace until they gradually become the owners of their own land. Compared to you, all about the performance and nothing else. I even wanted to try and lighten your burden a bit, but I see that I'm no use anymore. It all feels so desperate. As Elvira said those words, she collapsed on the table crying. Theodore could not believe the things he heard from his mother, and as he kept clicking the pieces together, he felt sorrow as well. But then decided to gather himself up and give his mother the best comfort and solution he could give. He took the table, placed next to his mother, and sat next to her. Now that you finally managed to clean the air between us, we can finally open up properly, don't you think? My life has been performing, then what? We are still alive, and we have a farm to take care of. That is all I care. Theodore said back to Elvira, and she raised her head back and looked at her son. She replied back, "Do you really think that is okay? I won't believe that is just okay." Her eyes widened and her sound raised a bit after she said that. Theodore simply implied back, "What else we have?" Evie was about to collapse again until she realized that it's no use. She couldn't help it, and no one else seemingly wanted to. Theodore let his mother to be and tried to come up with something that cheer Evie up. So then he remembered someone who could share a happy saying. He decided to pick up the house's phone and call to the ducks. Theodore waited for a while, and his call was picked up. Yes, hello, Roderick Duck speaking. Yes, hello, Miss Duck. Your apprentice Theodore Trevor here. Do you have time to speak for a while? I do. Theodore asked from his master, through the phone lines and kept going. Mr. Duck, do you have our testament? I believe that I might have found one worthy witness from my house. Hold it! There it is. Good. What if we'd speak more about this testament at the workshop tomorrow? Do you have anything else right now in your mind, Mr. Trevor? I'll gladly respond. No, not anymore. Goodbye. See you tomorrow. Roderick was quickly interrupted by his daughter. Wait, is it Theodore in the phone? I have something in my mind right now that I'd like to talk about, Lucia said, and Roderick gave the phone to her. Hey, Theodore. Where did you know that I was able to talk with you? Or is the feeling mutual? She asked a bit playfully from Theodore, but the boy tried to reply back. I didn't know about it. I meant to call Roderick, but did you want to talk about something? Yes, I'd love to. I wish to bring you to the marketplace of Corn this week. What do you say about that? Maybe I can get there. Just when you plan to get me there, I'll tell you in time. Probably tomorrow. Okay, but please tell me tomorrow. Bye-bye. Good night and bye-bye, Theodore said and cut the call. Lucia felt like fool once again, when she didn't remember the thing that Theodore was working under his father's service. So they indeed had his phone number, even written down. Theodore didn't yet think throughout the whole picture. But what if Evie had brought everything up they might have needed this week? Theodore then took a look at the fridge and decided to ask from his mother if it is okay that he will be this time the one to be in the Claw Lakes marketplace. Evie was surprised by this turn of events. The biggest point of worry for her was that Theodore gets lost in the big marketplace. But Theodore reassured her that he has help with him there. Oh, really? Who? Are you sure you can? I am sure that I can trust her. Rest here for a while now, and I will take care of something new this time. Theodore interrupted her mother's burst of worries. And so Elvira's gesture started to move from more and more pleased looking. She had heard the same song when Theodore started to become an active hunter and when he moved under Roderick's service. Evie had formed a certain trust to it all, so she didn't protest anymore. The thing was that during its last minutes saw that Travers decided to get under blankets and turn the lights off. Evie suddenly remembered that something might have been off. Did he say trust her? Who is he talking about? To be continued. The second week, Tuesday of December, had begun. This day would leave a big mark to the life of two teens who believed that they already gone through it all. Today, their future would be rewritten for the rest of their life. Theodore woke up with his usual early bird style and moved to his house's kitchen, much to the boy's surprise, and behaved there. Evie wasn't anywhere to be seen. Theodore was actually a bit shaken by this chain of events. Was he just more silent than usual, or was something actually off? Theodore didn't know how much to do. He still kept his routines as usual, but after some time, Theodore was about to leave home. He decided to place his ear on Elvira's door and listen. Was she actually asleep? It appeared so that she was until Theodore heard sniffing and slight sobbing. It was like she was crying, while still being somewhat asleep. Theodore didn't want to intervene in her mother's sleep, so he didn't pay attention to it anymore and kept going. He was about to leave for work, but then remembered his and mother's conversation for the last evening, and he couldn't help it and shed a tear. I'll be under good care, Elvira, he thought, and left for work. Theodore was still sorrowful by the events that occurred, but mourning over them were no use, so he tried to be positive. He felt a bit lighter when he remembered that the new work model of the workshop, which turned the days a lot more formulaic and calmer to the boy's mind. When he could only focus for the one step of production where he excelled at, it was easy to get into a better mood. He also remembered that Lucia would probably bring him to the marketplace of Claw Lake, a place which was completely unknown for the boy. And also, he could do a favor for Elvira that way. Everyone wins there. Theodore arrived to the workshop with his usual routine, 5:30. Roderick and Gustav were already there in their own places. Gustav behind his typewriter, and Roderick with his usual work suit and fulfilling the role he got. Surface treatment. Such as oiling all the prepared products his subjects had done.
He used certain method, rarely even considered the surface treatment due to its basic rules. Roderick spread the first layer of oil with large rag made out of fiber. But then he spread the second layer of oil with smooth sandpaper. Even the man himself acknowledged its contradictory nature, but it served its purpose. It made the oil layer look deeper because of the dust that crumbled to the wood because of the oil. The surface was left with rather an unbalanced layer, but it was all to be fixed with steel wool and a third layer of oil. No one else ever knew this method, but Roderick said that it was all just a secret technique only practiced by the dogs. Theodore, who always saw Roderick as his best teacher, he didn't dare to even question his master's techniques. He just nodded to everything he said and stayed blindly loyal. Much to the boys' surprise, Roderick and Gustav were the first person to speak during the morning. Faithful and diligent beginning of a man you are, Theodore. Remember when our village's elders made fun of Alvor's brothers that they weren't the most passionate and eager men from here, but they don't pretend to be, just like you. Gustav stated, and Roderick stopped his work for a moment and walked up to the two. Also, you are the only one besides us who is here at this hour. Tell me, when all the other workers arrive, I don't think they were really fair to them, and I'll sure to point that out today. Roderick continued and walked up to his apprentice so close that he could whisper something to his ear. Lucia will be here when her school is over. We talked about your idea during the evening, and I think there shouldn't be any problems to it. When the work hours are over, you two can go if you want. Also, take good care of her. But Roderick still kept going with a lot more trimmed down and quiet voice. In his language was also a huge amount of respect and faith that Theodore will and is capable for everything he expected. This mindset has been in Roderick's head for a while now, because Theodore always managed to surpass his expectations. Out of the boy's own will to prove himself that he indeed is worthy of his name. None of it had to do with Roderick, but his constantly rising bar certainly had an effect on the young Travers, and his view on the world around him. When Roderick told what he wanted, he kept going on with his work. Gustav hadn't yet left, and he looked like he wanted to apologize for something. He cleared up his throat and told the young Trevor standing against him. Forgive me if I hadn't yet given you any lessons like you wished from last week. I just had to spin papers around my table. That time wasn't simply on our side. Theodore realized that too. Gustav almost every day kept him some sort of a lecture about school subjects, but he hadn't done anything for some time. The boy kept going. It's all right, I believe. I would have missed much if I had been with you, but do you now have time for some education? Gustav's mustache raised to the roof when he heard that, and stated back. Of course, if you, my friend, wish so. Everything is prepared. Shall we start later today? After some time, all of the other workers of the workshop arrived to their places at their usual times. This was a bit disappointing for Roderick, and he made sure to speak about yesterday's events to them. Despite it all, Tuesday moved like a recently oiled machine, and after Monday had taught its lessons, and so everything felt like it has been perfected in practice. The reality wasn't yet perfect, but just the detail that mistakes were no longer made certainly raised the day's mood. Despite the good mood, the day went by, and everyone had to be disappointed when the clock closed at 4 p.m. But so, everyone decided to start their clean-up time and move on to their home.
Theodore was a bit conflicted whether he should be eager or disappointed as well, about the day being already over, but he knew that Lucia would probably wait for him somewhere there. So he decided to get moving after the cleanup time.
Theodore and all the other carpenters gathered their belongings and left the workshop. Much to Roderick's and Theodore's surprise, Lucia was nowhere to be seen. What this might mean? They didn't bother to wait and find out, and began their stroll back home. Roderick got an idea why Lucia wasn't, because when he and Theodore stepped out of the house, they saw that a new snowfall had begun a few hours before, and it had already created over 50 centimeters tall stack of snow. That would make walking harder and slower. Also, shovels were to be needed once again. Lucia was on her way to the workshop from school, but it wasn't quite in the time she expected. Because of the questionable condition of roads in the village, and the lack of sustainability made walking along them a challenge of their own. She made her way to home, but stopped there and started to gather her belongings that she might have needed today. When that was done, she considered to get back outside of her house and walk to the workshop. But when she took a look at the clock, she didn't see it as a necessary task anymore. She just had to wait her father and Theodore to arrive. During her wait, she couldn't help but feel pleased about the turn of events. Sure, the house's supplies went out completely, but still, they could use an addition. Also, the chance to bring her new friend there made it all more positive.
Theodore and Roderick arrived about 15 minutes later to the Dark's villa, and Lucia welcomed them in. Because there wasn't questions anymore to be asked, so the young pair started their stroll right away. The road where walked along with tired legs felt like walking in glue, especially Theodore, him having to stand and walk around the whole day without any breaks. Despite his legs feeling like they'd say themselves out whenever they just wanted, he couldn't help but smile. While talking in the winter's darkness, Lucia couldn't left it unnoticed, and she even called it out. What it is that you find so appealing about this all? I've never seen you this bright. Theodore immediately snapped away from his state of calm when he heard Lucia's soft but asking tone of voice, and left out an unnoticeable gasp. I'm just living in my calmest moments of the day. Calmest? What makes this stroll in these circumstances the calmest? Yes, no pressure to perform, just walking along the road. That is all I care. Lucia was still a bit shocked by this sort of behavior by Theodore, but then she had gotten used to it for now. She was still interested in how she could finally get Theodore into a more comfortable circle. But this conversation reassured her that Theodore indeed didn't enjoy his life that much. He wanted a change. A good sign, Lucia thought in her head. Her thoughts were stopped when Theodore said that he had to pick something from home, while pointing at a hut next to the road. Lucia took a look at there, and she couldn't help but feel disappointed. Despite she didn't have any high expectations about the Trevor's household, and she had seen many small huts like this one, the fact that the person she admired had to live under such fate was depressing. When Lucia just kept waiting in the middle of the road, Theodore had marched to his home, grabbed a clapper bag. They weren't that aesthetic, but convenient to their size and endurance. Elvira was also in the house while baking a bread out of rye. Theodore walked up to her and told about his plans, and at least asked her opinion about it. Hey Mom, if you'd excuse me, I'd like to go to the markets today. After those words were said, Evie's gesture changed back from her primary numbers into the same as the last evening, ashamed and disappointed, as she had to hold a tear. Are you really sure about it? Without any guidance or knowledge over the place? And you decided to tell me about it just now? She tried to say while words in her mouth got tangled at each other. Theodore was quick to reassure his mother about the situation. He raised his arm to point the figure who could be spotted from the outside. I am not alone, and I know her. She is to be trusted. And also she's important to me, Theodore explained. Elvira almost jumped when she heard the word important. Oh, a girl there? Important to you? Well, what do you do here anymore? She awaits you, Ellie stated while her mood immediately rised up. Theodore took his wallet to his pocket and left the house, while Evie was almost constantly 2 inches off the ground. Theodore stepped out from his house and greeted Lucia again. Lucy let out a chuckle when she saw Theodore's choice of equipment compared to hers one small bag made from leather. Theodore understood that laugh and played along. I know we poor people don't have it fancy. Instead, ours is practical. Lucia didn't realize that this was meant to be partially a joke, so she tried to get more serious and replied back. I know, but practical is better after all. She tried not to hurt Theodore's emotions. Her voice saw some nervousness in it, but the boy kindly assured her. Depends. Theodore replied while sounding a lot calmer than Lucia at the moment. After Lucia heard that, she realized that Theodore didn't feel anything bad for the inequality in wealth, so she thought it was best to move on. The two kept walking, and after about 2 kilometers, the sign of Claw Lake came across them. So this is what their coat of arms looks like. Is it supposed to be representative of the city or something? So this is what their coat of arms looks like. Is it supposed to represent something of the city? Theodore asked with certain curiosity. He had never seen any other villages or cities in the world, so this sign alone opened a big door for the world around and outside of his safe and predictable homeland. Claw Lake's coat of arms was a shield-shaped, and it had 2 boats on it, rowing away from each other, and below them was a fish swimming underneath the boats. The boats were colored green and purple, and the fish was golden. The shield itself was blue as lake water against the sunshine in the middle of a day. Indeed, it shows the most important livelihoods methods here. Almost everyone here happens to be a boat enthusiast or a fisher. Lucia replies back, now with more half-jokingly tone. Theodore didn't recognize this joke, but he thought that there wasn't anything bad about that. Such as everyone who owns land also takes care of it, the boy thought it. and replies back with a simple, "All right." The buildings and lights of Claw Lake were about to be at the couple's site, and so was the city's positive atmosphere. Theodore was quick to make a comment about it. Those lights, do they come from the buildings, or from somewhere else? Lucia replied to this question fast. They come from the buildings and somewhere else. They come from light bulbs that are used outside. When their light meets the white snow, it reflects everything towards the sky. I quite like that effect. Theodore's curiosity immediately got grabbed from Lucia's explanation. Physics. Something Gustav hadn't yet taught him at all. Because Theodore thought that it was no use. But now, when he got a practical example of that, his opinion on the matter immediately changed. But now, it wasn't the best time for further questions. Lucia got the attention soon back where it should have been, where the two were going to the marketplace. She pointed with her finger there and said, "There you have it, the largest agricultural exhibition you can ever find from here. Everything you can just come up with exists here." Theodore was quite amused by Lucia's words and let out a chuckle. It sounded overblown, but he didn't know what to expect, so he decided to see where this little adventure would bring him. So he remained silent, and not long, the marketplace's gates were in front of the pair. The couple walked past them, and the eventfulness of the evening began. As the two were standing in the middle of Claw Lake's marketplace, Theodore had already almost lost his sense of direction because of the amount of people and different blocks of products are all around him. All he could do is let Lucia lead him wherever they'd go. Her being the more familiar one with the setting and atmosphere, the first place Lucia led him was obvious the food markets, which held grains, vegetables, steaks, drinkables, and sweets. Because Theodore was not prepared for the best on the evening, nor did he investigate what his house might have needed to actually buy. This meant that he really couldn't do much other than just watch what was happening around him. Lucia knew everything she had to buy, and she was constantly on the move. Theodore ended up only buying some more exotic grains that he hadn't yet seen in his household, and carrots, both being something the Trevors didn't farm. Lucia, on the other hand, took everything she could have just gotten her hands on. When the two were just gotten out of the largest human mass, and some silence was around them, so they could finally hear each other. "So, aren't you impressed by the scale of what the market has? Or what about the happening here?" Lucia asked from her friend, and she was eager to hear how she managed to entertain Theodore with this little trip. "Something I didn't expect, but I was prepared for something small and quiet. Not this otherworldly and flashy and loud. But now that we still can hear each other, is it possible for us to do a quick run through the entire place? This indeed has caught my interest." Theodore answered. Lucia's smile cracked to its peak for a second when she heard the suggestion, and grabbed Theodore's hand and started to pull the boy around the marketplace. Theodore, despite his wish being fulfilled, looked troubled because of this sudden turn of events. He didn't dare to say it out loud, but it troubled him because it happened in front of a large group of people. Lucia and Theodore marched through the blocks dedicated to machines, tractors, livestock, boats, and fishing and knives, and even an auction for unused or otherwise outdated military equipment. Each one of them had their lights, but they didn't quite pique the couple's interest in the same way as the last ones did. Blocks dedicated to hunting and textile work. The one half the couple being the expert on the other. They had a lot more to say about it than to each other. In the hunting block, Theodore kept going and going about the mechanical details of each gun's manufacturers and which guns he had inherited from his family's past. Also, the thing which comforted him was that Lucia was indeed listening to him, and she had let go of his hand. The human mass was also a lot smaller this time. Despite his mouth kept running, Theodore still tried to take his friend into account and stop for a second if she was getting tired of it. Everything made by the metal of the estate is so much more technically wiser. They are all of small springs and its safer is a lot more reliable, especially those that are bought through the west of Atlantic stand no chance against the local industry. Theodore kept going until he heard a man's voice behind him. So you, boy, are the gun enthusiast. Mind helping me a little with this problem here? Theodore turned around and he saw a tall, probably 25-year-old beardy adult. Theodore himself was already very tall, but this man who stood behind him was even bigger compared to him. This tall white gorilla also had a big and dark sunglasses which a stereotypical biker would use. Theodore then shifted his focus on the point of service that was behind him. It appeared to be a weaponsmith's hut, but it appears to be shut. Theodore then pushed this man aside and walked to the hut. So, I take it as the weaponsmith is not here, Theodore said. And at the same second he recognized the weapon of this man was speaking of. It was double-barreled 212 caliber metal of the estate model Savage. Theodore immediately remembered his first time with Simon trying to fix the Savage's safer's function. It took weeks to fully realize what was wrong with the safer and what it lacked. So, when you were speaking of the metal of the estate, do you happen to have knowledge how to fix this one? The big man asked from Theodore, and who looked more than excited. Soon after the question was asked, he gave a quick nod and picked up the gun. Theodore took the stocks from it and the metals, started to reassemble the machinery. Lucia, who hadn't yet ever seen the gun's insides, was very surprised by the technicalities of the machinery and how detail-oriented it was. Theodore kept explaining about the pipe selectors, about the savers, and the position of the hammers that they were supposed to be. Because of Lucia's family's disinterest about hunting, she didn't even know the features of the shotgun had. She just remained silent, as Theodore and the other man kept chatting about the assembly, despite Lucia having an alienated feeling. She still was very happy to see the true Theodore, who didn't behave like a machine. Also, she got to see her friend in his own element. So when the saver's tip is behind the changer and not in front of it, it causes both of the barrels to get triggered. But now it should work as it should, Theodore told to the gun's owner, who then picked up and loaded it. You shouldn't use an empty gun, but this is an emergency, he said, and turned off the safer and tried the selector, which let out its usual clicking noise, and pulled the gun's trigger twice. Then the gun gave 2 clicks, and the owner shouted, "Yes!" He thanked Theodore and left the place. Lucia was surprised and started to show signs of uncomfortableness because of that oddly eerie person they just met. Theodore instead found him just as one of those little too eager hunters who only cared about the index finger's face. Also, there was something familiar about him. Despite him buying his services, the man's appearance from his poorly cared beard and just overall lack of hygiene made him feel like he came from a poor background. Much like Theodore did. Nevertheless, the two kept going, and now the last section of the hunting block awaited. Bows and arrows. It wasn't all that special for neither of two, so they were quick to move to the textile workshop block. The young couple was walking next to a sharpshooting game, which was orchestrated by the local bowmasters. In reality, they were just simple enthusiasts, but no one else was more skilled than them. Two children were competing against each other, and it seemed the other had just won. He swinged one of the sharp arrows he still had in his left hand. The tip of the arrow just happened to rise in the same height as Theodore and Lucia's heads. Then it made a perfect cut over Theodore's right cheek. It was such a coincidence that it reopened the scar Theodore had on his cheek only 1 week ago. Theodore jumped at least an inch off the ground because of the surprise that came so suddenly. Theodore flinched out of his sheer shock and immediately put his hand on the cheek. One of the bowmasters came to relieve the situation and to sort out what even happened. Lucia tried to comfort her and calm Theodore, but he had other thoughts. What was that? What is it that you dare to swing sharp arrows around just like that? That is not how a human behaves, Theodore said to the boy. He tried to keep his voice in check, but he couldn't help it. His voice started to sound like he was about to give into a violent and bitter outburst. What enforced the man's anger was that everyone seemed to be on his side. But no one would have allowed this to happen because the child was obviously sorry and tired. Because the child was obviously sorry and tried through the sheer tension and fear apologize to Theodore. Unfortunately, Theodore did not see it as that. He has never been apologized by his family about anything, and when no one was to speak for the boy's defense, that it was an accident, Theodore saw himself as the authority figure without limits. Theodore was about to grab the arrow from the boy's hands and shout to him again, but then he remembered what he shouted to the boy previously. Normal people wouldn't do that. Theodore collected himself and said, "Just promise, this ain't happening again. Then I'll forgive you." The boy nodded in tears to him, and so Theodore decided to move on. The bowmaster stayed with the boys and tried to comfort them after what happened. Lucia kept staring at Theodore's cheek and the man's way of living it. He didn't even bother to pay attention to it. He just kept going. "Are you sure that you aren't going to do anything to that? I might know something that will help." Theodore moved his head towards Lucia while still covering his scratch with his big hands. Lucia took Theodore's hand away from the scratch, and while she was doing that, she told, "At least this would cheer you up." Then she moved her head towards Theodore's scratch, and right when she had to put her mouth over Theodore's cheek, he let out a gasp and stepped away, while shouting in embarrassment, "We are in public!" Theodore felt exactly the same when Lucia pulled her with him before in the evening. Lucia looked like Theodore was kidding to her, because of the marketplace has already started to get less dense of humans at the point of silence. But when she further examined Theodore's face, she realized that Theodore indeed meant that.
Oh, forgive me if I were rude to you," Theodore cut Lucia saying in shame. "What if we get to the last block we haven't yet visited?" Lucia then nodded to this apology and suggestion, so they moved on and arrived to the block dedicated to handwork and textiles. This time Theodore would follow Lucia in her element. Lucia was lecturing about all the different strings, wools, knots and knits. Theodore started to wonder, was this the feeling Lucia had while I was talking about the guns? Curiosity, much like physics. Lucia, much to Theodore's surprise, had a similar tone when she was talking about the industrialization. Lucia, much to Theodore, had a similar tone when she was talking about the industrialization of products. See the markings and forms over that one roll of these fabrics. They're all linear and simple. Mr. Spikes had taught us since her course began how I can surpass all the modern manufacturers in quality just by paying attention. I believe with that we can bring the past's hunt skills back to the present, don't you think? Theodore processed this question for a second, and was about to say something until the same man from the hunting block interrupted him. Am I getting uncontrolled jealousy to your countryside, fellas? Especially compared to the excuse-me city I live in. The same beard tall man came to the spot, this time with an elderly lady with him. We indeed agree with you, and we are just desperate as you trying to find a solution. Unfortunately, I and Grandma specifically can't find the space or labor for us. Neither out the poor city even tries to help with their ambitions. I am indeed surprised how you northern farmers have gotten such anti-slum here. Indeed surprising, but perhaps it explains your skills and knowledge. Theodore and Lucia weren't quite sure how to respond to this information, nor were they even sure what this man was talking about. They stood there for a while until the elderly lady opened her mouth. He's talking about that our own home city that has failed its purpose, unlike Claw Lake. But both of these places share the same issues that you just talked about. Theodore started getting more and more curious about the situation of the home. Did Gustav mention that city already once? Then he decided to join to the conversation. Are you from the south? Was the city's name Uppwärd? Both the man and the granny nodded, and this drove Theodore even further. Lucia, on the other hand, asked what specifically went wrong with Uppwärd's building, because Claw Lake, in contrast, was such a successfully designed city. Why or what was the purpose of the city that had failed? I don't quite get what might be wrong. The grandma started to tell the background of their situation and where the town had failed. The story of Uppwärd began by its founder, Ernest Krulag, had planned the first building, a storage designed for rich man's belongings. Around this marble and stone monuments gather factories, which were funded by him. Through time, the monument would be changed to a town hall, because the factories had pulled living around Mr. Krolak's land. Because of the town's low amount of education and Mr. Krolak's lack of interest, the city was growing with an uncontrollable acceleration, and no plans were made to make them actual apartments. This created a strong sense of segregation around the city, and despite the name Mr. Krolak have made to resemble upward, the reality was pure downward spiral. No proper housing or the city's outer parts, imbalanced wages, and even open corruption started to tear people's faith in the ground. Because of all these internal problems, people are very cautious when using money if they have something to begin with. So we had to move our business to here, because we finally can at least get something sold. This answer gave the young couple even more questions to their minds, but because the evening was running late, and time returning to home with it, so they thanked the silk sellers they met, wished good evening and the future, so they started to make their stroll towards home. Lucia, throughout their walk, couldn't help but tease Theodore a little bit about his sports and compare to hers. I weren't summoned prepared, or what? No need for any good for something like you. Well, you made yourself sound like hunter expert. Theodore didn't pay attention to it because Lucia was indeed correct about his preparation, and she didn't mean anything bad, so he just laughed along. The two walked past the sighing of Rind Lake, the village they lived in. Shortly after that, they made it to the Trevor's household.
Lucia followed Theodore to the front door of his house. There Lucia was about to say her goodbyes until the boy, Theodore, dropped his clapper bag and leaned towards Lucia. Sorry again, if I were rude to you in the marketplace. But what I actually wanted to say, I don't think saying thanks is enough. How grateful I am for this day, Lucia. Theodore said and grabbed Lucia into his arms. He blew a kiss into the girl's lips and raised her off the ground. It took a while for Lucia to realize what was going on, but when she did, she joined to the expression of passion. Neither of them knew how long they were like that, but when Theodore let Lucia go of his arms, it felt like eternity had just ended. Theodore whispered to the girl's ears, "Thank you for all the support you've given, Lucia Dark." Lucia then raised her on her toes and kissed the scratch of Theodore's cheek. When she let go, she said back, "It was little, if your devotion to Father and his efforts are concerned. You have proven yourself to be worth of love, perhaps even way earlier than the day we met the first time. With our own cooperation, we might be able to bring this little village back to the map, including our families." Theodore nodded and put up a smile he had never shown before. It was so filled with happiness and confidence, something he had lacked ever since the day he was born. Days he can't remember. The couple's moment was interrupted when Evie suddenly opened the door to Theodore's home. The elder said that she heard footsteps, but no one opened the door. When she saw Theodore and Lucia surprisingly close to each other, her jaw suddenly dropped. She tried to get words out of her mouth, but it was no use. Theodore then asked, was something wrong? To that, Evie finally managed to gather her head and said, "So you found yourself your life's pair, right? Who are you, miss? I am Elvira Trevor." So she walked towards Lucia for a handshake. Lucia happily took this handshake, and so it felt like two families had just made a pact with each other to pursue a greater future. Elvira, when she heard that the woman Theodore was infatuated was the village's richest man's daughter. This reveal severely shocked Evie's black and white worldview, and so her feeling of failure. Unexpected for certain. I wish we could speak for longer, but the evening is already turned into night. Or do you, Miss Dark, still wish to stay here? Elvira asked from the woman in front of her, and so Lucia replied to that. I agree. That night has already started. Shall we say our goodbyes now? Evie nodded and said to her owns. Theodore still stayed silent for a second, and before telling his goodbyes, he told Lucia the following. If Mr. Duck still remembers our phone call yesterday, tell him that my mother is the worthy witness I talked about. By the way, if you just happen to know, why has to find witnesses for his testament? Why is his labor force not an option? I believe it's that he doesn't want his subjects to know that his successor is still under 20 years old. Theodore, satisfied with the answer Lucia gave, stood still silently. So did Lucia. It took for a while until the two finally got their mouths open. Good night, love. Both of them said, and at the same time, an indescribable smile appeared on their faces. Lucia left the Trevor's household's front yard, and Theodore stepped inside to his house. This chain of events, from the 13th of November to the 12th of December, was to the past. Theodore's completely unthinkable.
Theodore's work had been a change that truly worked into his favor. He had deepened his connection to his boss, and most importantly, he had found himself a loved one. No need to suppress emotions, no need to be ashamed, no purpose to be afraid of a longer future. It was pure line of solid gold, which illuminated these 2 weeks. A reason to keep going. Finally someone he could view as a partner and supporter. Lucia indeed felt the same. She finally found a man she felt like truly deserved someone into his life. A man who was being willing to go into the absolute farthest just to keep him and his family safe. Someone whose presence made her feel safe and who she knew could trust. This was the true miracle of early winter, which echoed far to the future and brought such a change in plans, with its own variety of choices to where to go next. Only time will decide where those choices will develop. The end.